Cruz. But we want to say a special word to the Pakistani people for their huge hospitality. Shukriya. The Speaker of the Portuguese Parliament, Honorable Aguiar Branco, asked me to send his best regards to all of you. Parliaments and peoples should be like Siamese brothers who always walk arm in arm. It's an honor, but also a thrill to be here in Islamabad, moderating a panel on human rights in Afghanistan. The decline of democracy and the regressions in the protection of human rights are dangers that concern us all, even in Europe, in all our countries. But today, in this debate, it is mandatory to speak about the violation of women's rights in Afghanistan, certainly one of the most terrible in recent human history. Women make up half of humanity, and the denial of their rights is the denial of half of humanity. We hear about girls in Afghanistan who go to clandestine schools, in cellars and in caves, because they can't resist the urge to learn, and because their mothers and fathers, risking their lives, know that only by going to school can these girls one day be free. We are going to talk about human rights, freedom, and equality in Afghanistan, or more precisely, the unbearable lack of it, and I will give the floor to those who have been fighting for them for a long time. So first, I will give the floor to Honorable Zohra Nawrozi, parliamentarian from Afghanistan in exile. You have the floor. I think you are on mute. You must change your microphone.
Unmute.
On mute.
It's good.
Perfect. You have the floor, please.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Dear members of the parliament from different countries and my dear guests and colleagues, and thank you for having me with you. I want to take this opportunity to talk about the human rights situation in our country, from women and girls and ethnic minority to all the people in Afghanistan. From various challenges that may be unbelieving for many of us. Unfortunately, there are many problems, such as the closure of the school and university due to not being allowed to the work, society, and travel. And this is very big problem for the woman and girl, especially for girl. They cannot go to the school, they cannot go to the university, and they cannot continue the education. And target association and thousands of other problems that exist and cannot be said to be maybe a problem. Maybe is it better to say where is in the world is there a place where women and girls do not have rights and cannot achieve their dreams? But unfortunately, it is in our country. This issue and problems can never be forgotten because it's painful and action must be taken to solve it. But unfortunately, after the country fell to the Taliban, there was no effective support from different countries, especially for the people of Afghanistan. Women and girls who unfortunately lost all their dreams and lived their lives without a purpose and goals. In addition to this important issue, religion and ethnic minority, such as the Hazara people, who lost one or more members of their family. And the issue of forced migration is killing people for various reasons and thousands of other reasons, through that's the lack of human rights in our country. And unfortunately, countries that support such a situation and feel that the commitment in right and justice for our people, especially women and girls. And this is painful and disappointed. And I and other members of the Afghan Women Parliamentarians and Leader Network, AWPLN Network, ask you to take this important issue sincerely and raise the voice of Afghan women together with other international partners and all the agencies that have been established in this field of human rights to solve them. Many times we need to remind so that other governments and international partners pay attention in this field and do not forget there is no justice in Afghanistan. There are no human rights in Afghanistan, and there are no right to choose. For a moment, imagine we send our children to university with a word of hope and desire, but they never come to home. Can you imagine a mother and father who have lost several children and still cannot believe that this is a dream? Can we imagine that morning will be night and night will be morning and live without hope and any goals? All these are part of the problem of our people in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, they're struggling with it. And we must raise of the voice of the justice of women and girls, Hazara people, and all other people in home country and support them. Dear guests, at the end, I would like to remind you the human rights crisis in Afghanistan is the important
You're
issue
almost done.
that unfortunately
Click the
many
download
countries
in the
have
top
ignored
right
and
to
forgotten.
continue.
And on trying to difference the different treatment of ethnic group in Afghanistan. And it is a very big problem and needs more negotiation and useful work. And this is very, very important because when we came together as a group from different countries and have a negotiation about the human rights in Afghanistan, we have clear negotiation and a strong action about the people in Afghanistan, especially women and girls. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Honorable Zohra Nawrozi. And I will now give the floor to our champion on human rights, Honorable Fawzia Koofi, who is also a parliamentarian from Afghanistan in exile, Vice President of the National Assembly of Afghanistan. You have the floor, please.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad that I'm now able to speak in depth as last evening during the prestigious ceremony of the award acceptance. I wasn't able to share the details of what happens to my sisters in Afghanistan, but beyond. I was just reading an article this morning, and I was wondering how long it will take for the international norms and standards, for the internationally accepted laws, where we all put our faith across the world to start being effective. Because in the case of Afghanistan especially, it's a clear violation of any internationally accepted laws and standards, including our own Islamic principles. And I would like to give few examples here. The definition of apartheid, although gender apartheid is not codified, but separation of any group of society on the basis of their gender, their race, their religion, their color is apartheid. So what's happening in Afghanistan is clearly separating women on the basis of their gender from work, education, access to economic resources. Now it has become even further difficult because, as you all know, because you're just living across the border, for my Pakistani sisters, now they have asked the woman to not speak in the public because their voice is regarded as intimacy. So the consequences of what Taliban do, and we all know that the Taliban, where I also negotiated with them, and I, of course, will negotiate in the future if that means a peaceful Afghanistan. And I'm coming in a minute when I say peaceful, what is that definition of peace for women and for people of Afghanistan? When we were negotiating with Taliban, they were actually demonstrating a different narrative. They were demonstrating a narrative of Taliban 2.0, that the Taliban have changed. And on the record, they have clearly told me in front of a room full of 70 men in Moscow, but also follow up in Doha, that their perspective of women's rights is that women can become ministers, foreign minister, be involved in business, social life. And the only thing they were hesitant, and they said the only two profession women cannot be is a judge and a head of state, which is even not a matter of agreement among different jurisprudence in Islam and among different Islamic clerks. On that base, we negotiated with them. However, after the former president fled Afghanistan and escaped, they took power, and slowly and gradually they have imposed their restrictions on women. And you all agree with me that these radicalized groups get their legitimacy by suppression. Especially they target education of women because they know that an educated woman, like all of you are, will never encourage her son to pick up a gun and fight and pursue his rights through violent means. They know that an educated woman will use her pen, will use her voice as a power to challenge or to pursue her rights. And so they know that in the future, if there are more educated women in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, there will be no space for them, and they will not have more people to brainwash and to recruit. That's why they're targeting education. It's not only in Afghanistan. I think what the Taliban claim, and you all know that their claim is beyond Afghanistan borders. Afghanistan has become, even from a security points of view, which many of us actually fail to connect the relationship between security and women and human rights. We only think women rights are a separated, a standing alone issue, while we fail to especially connect the relationship between women rights and women peace and security. Even if you look at in that perspective of security, Afghanistan is now hosting many military extremist groups. I don't need to go to the details. You know what I mean. So therefore, I think it's a common threat. Radicalization is a common threat. It's a threat to democracy. It's a threat to women's rights. And when I say democracy, I don't mean any Western concept. I think for 20 years, we just followed what the Western world told us. We were not able to have that space to have our own narrative and define our own principles of democracy. And therefore, we are where we are now. So I think it's time for all of us, especially for women in Pakistan, my sisters, because sooner or later, this flame will go it will reach any door, will go any border. We need to, first of all, make our governments accountable to act, to stand with the democratic forces, and to ask them to be accountable for what is happening in Afghanistan, especially in the case of women's rights, because this can come to Pakistan very easily given the 2,700 kilometers of border we have. This is the first thing. Second, a generation, yes, we lost democratic institutions, but people of Afghanistan still believe in democracy. Still, they believe that one day a government will come where they will be able to exercise their demands, their rights, their desire. So the democracy has not failed in Afghanistan. The institutions has collapsed. Therefore, I think we need to protect the democratic forces. In a way, we need to continue to provide people the hope, especially the women. I talked to these women, and in fact, just this morning, I was talking to some of these women where they want me to help them with scholarship from very remote areas of my province, with scholarship outside Africa. Just before the call, and that's why it took me a while to connect, I was talking to a mother who has only one daughter, two sons. She's a single mother. She was like, my daughter is suffering from mental health because she was in her last year of education, of school, to be graduate and then enter university. As a mother, you understand my situation. She is suffering mental health. What can you do? Yes, we can help them to come to Europe or US for scholarship. That even is very difficult because everybody talks about women's rights in Afghanistan, but nobody acts. Last year in the UN General Assembly, I asked for scholarship for girls in Afghanistan to be able to leave Afghanistan and pursue their education. This is something we need to do, especially for Pakistan, because culturally, religious-wise, and also in terms of logistic, it's much easier for girls from Afghanistan to travel to Pakistan. I know that you have your own problems like every other country has, but this is my call for you to force your government or institutions or whatever links you have to help these girls with come to Pakistan. For my sisters who are from the Global Institutes, I think the more we try to ignore what's happening in Afghanistan, the more people will start to lose their faith over these institutions, including ICC, ICJ, the UN resolutions, the UN Security Council resolutions, and therefore we need to make these institutions work. In our case, I think political pressure by activating the laws and internationally accepted declarations is a means for Taliban to accept a political process. Because after the Doha negotiation failed, the Taliban need to now restart a political process. But they think they're the only winner of this war, and they're not willing for a political settlement which is descriptive of Afghanistan's reality, as on the basis of which a government will be established that is representative of all segments of society. They are in the denial of that political process. Politically accepted government in Afghanistan is in the interest of our neighbors first and foremost, because as you know, right now, many of the military extremist groups, including some from Pakistan, are residing in Afghanistan, in different parts of Afghanistan. So therefore, before it's too late, I think we need to activate these international institutions, because what's happening in Afghanistan, above all, is the mental health. I can say 90% of the people that I talk to, the women especially, they are suffering from the mental health. And I think we need to, as words and statements are descriptive of our feelings. We need to go more than words and statements. We need to talk about policy-wise, what can we do for Afghanistan? I once again thank you for the opportunity, and I wish I was there to hug every one of my sisters there and give them love and give them the message that we need action beyond words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Fawzia Koofi. Your courage is an example for all those who fight for equality around the world. And I will now give the floor to Dr. Christine Cheng, a human rights officer from the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights. You have the floor, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. Parliamentarians are key stakeholders from promoting and protecting the human rights of people everywhere, including in Pakistan, where I have had the privilege and the honor to engage with a range of national and provincial legislators on international human rights law. I'm grateful to the parliamentarians for Global Action for inviting me to this forum to exchange with you on this important subject of accountability in Afghanistan. I regret that I'm unable to be in Islamabad with you. Let me start by emphasizing that the human rights situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate, particularly with the ongoing systematic persecution of women and girls on account of their gender. The vast majority of the population is suffering in poverty and from food insecurity, while human rights defenders and media workers continue to be arbitrarily arrested and detained for expressing opinions perceived as critical of the de facto authorities. The death penalty continues to be applied in public, as well as corporal punishment in violation of international law. attacks by armed groups against civilians continues. Afghanistan has experienced 4 decades of conflict, and Afghans have been subjected to widespread human rights violations and abuses, and violations of international humanitarian law committed by multiple perpetrators. Afghans have been denied truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence. Impunity and the abuse of power under successive administrations remain the reality. Today, I will draw on the recent report of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. In 2023, the Human Rights Council, the intergovernmental body within the United Nations system made up of 47 elected member states, requested the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, to present in 1 year a comprehensive report on the overall situation of human rights in Afghanistan, including a stock-taking of accountability options and processes for addressing human rights violations and abuses. The report states, accountability for past and current crimes in Afghanistan requires a multi-layered and multi-dimensional approach. Given the complex history of more than 40 years of conflict and international interventions, the scope and range of violations have affected generations of Afghanistan's people from all communities and have implicated multiple actors at different stages of the conflict. I will be speaking about the International Criminal Court, which I understand that you have been discussing over the last day. I will also address the International Court of Justice, universal jurisdiction. I will address the issue of international troops and their role in the accountability required for violations and abuses. I will also address non-judicial remedies. So, since the international military intervention in Afghanistan in 2001 that ended the first period of Taliban rule, there have been international accountability efforts. Some of these existing accountability measures include UN mechanisms, such as the Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in Afghanistan, whose mandate was established in 2021 by the Human Rights Council to undertake monitoring and reporting on the human rights situation in the country and to make recommendations, as well as to engage on urgent cases and issues, support to the extent possible human rights defenders, particularly Afghan women human rights defenders, who continue their resistance at significant personal risk. Another important accountability element, international element that has been ongoing is the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. Since 2002, UNAMA has had a human rights service component, and this is also the representation for OHCHR in Afghanistan. And this human rights service leads in monitoring, reporting, and advocating on the human rights situation in Afghanistan, and is mandated to do so by the UN Security Council. Before I go into international accountability measures, the ICC, the ICJ, and the universal jurisdiction, I think we also need to address the issue of national accountability. And that's just to remember that all states have legal obligations, including under the Geneva Conventions and associated instruments of international humanitarian law, international human rights conventions, and customary international law. And that requires states to investigate, prosecute, and punish persons who bear responsibility for gross violations or abuses of human rights or serious violations of international humanitarian law, and also to provide reparations to victims. And also to recall that Afghanistan is a state party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and this was in 2003. Moreover, the Afghan Penal Code which entered into force in February 2018, incorporates Afghanistan's substantive treaty obligations under the Rome Statute, and that includes war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression. And it also includes command responsibility as a mode of liability. However, as we know, in 2021, after the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, the de facto authorities initiated a review of previous laws to assess their compliance with Sharia and Afghan traditions. And effectively, the Taliban then suspended the penal code. Officially, in April 2024, the de facto Ministry of Justice stated that the laws of the previous government had been annulled. At the same time, the de facto authorities issued a general amnesty for former officials of the government and former members of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. But they did establish internal and external entities that were tasked with accountability functions. These, however, are very difficult to evaluate in practice. To talk now about the international mechanisms available, the International Criminal Court. Afghanistan has been publicly under preliminary examination by the ICC from 2007 to 2017. In November 2017, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court submitted a request to the pretrial chamber for the authorization to formally open an investigation into Afghanistan, believing that there was reasonable basis that war crimes and crimes against humanity had been committed by all parties. Following authorization received by the prosecutor in 2020, the Afghan authorities in March 2020 asked to defer the investigation in order to conduct domestic level implementation of their newly adopted 2018 penal code. In September 2021, following the Taliban's takeover, the ICC prosecutor requested authorization to resume the investigation. And in October 2022, the ICC's pretrial chamber granted the prosecutor's request to authorize resumption of the investigation. And in April 2023, the appeals chamber clarified that the prosecutor's investigation was in relation to alleged crimes committed on the territory of Afghanistan in the period since May 2003, as well as other alleged crimes that have a nexus to the armed conflict in Afghanistan and are sufficiently linked to the situation and were committed on the territory of other state parties since 2002. The investigation is still continuing. The International Court of Justice. I'm not sure how much discussion there has been in the forum in the previous day about the ICJ, but it's an interesting moment to consider the International Court of Justice because it has begun to address legal aspects of situations of serious human rights violations. And the prime example is the Gambia versus Myanmar, where investigations of the former fact-finding mission on Myanmar and evidence also collected by the independent investigative monitoring mechanism have been made available to the parties to the litigation. In Afghanistan's case, I think what is interesting to note is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. The CEDAW Convention provides that any dispute between two or more states parties concerning the interpretation or application of the convention, which is not settled by negotiation, shall, at the request of one of them, be submitted to arbitration. On the 25th of September, this was last month, at the UN General Assembly, Canada, Australia, Germany, and the Netherlands announced their intention to take the Taliban to the International Court of Justice for gender discrimination. This would mark the first time that the International Court of Justice has been used by countries to challenge one another over gender discrimination. In this legal move, the first since the Taliban took over, it is expected that Afghanistan would have 6 months to provide a response before the International Court of Justice would hold a hearing and would likely propose provisional measures. Moving on to the subject of extraterritorial or universal jurisdiction, and this is cases in third states involving Afghan nationals. Extraterritorial or universal jurisdiction, where established and depending on its form, enables a state to exercise criminal jurisdiction over certain crimes, such as war crimes, torture, crimes against humanity, and genocide, consistent with international law, regardless of the location where they were committed or the nationalities of the perpetrator or victim. While many countries have incorporated provisions related to crimes under international law, the number of jurisdictions currently with open cases in respect to extraterritorial conduct remains modest. There are currently only 13 states. In the situation of Afghanistan, cases under universal jurisdiction have been brought on behalf of Afghan victims of crimes under international law in Germany, in the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. And this is for violations or abuses that were committed prior to the Taliban's rise to power in the 1990s. Wider and more consistent use of the available jurisdiction in third states, consistent with international law, would be an important complement to existing accountability efforts. I would also like to address the issue of the accountability of international forces in Afghanistan. From the United States-led international military intervention from 2001 to 2021, a coalition of international forces was deployed to Afghanistan in support of the government and national security forces, including contingents from multiple countries. Throughout this period, UNAMA documented violations of international human rights and humanitarian law committed by international forces. International forces operated under various status of force agreements, and these established the rights and privileges of each country's international military personnel present in the country. And in general, these provided personnel serving with international forces immunity from the jurisdiction of domestic laws in Afghanistan, but obligated sending countries to investigate violations by their international forces, and where established, to punish them according to their military justice systems. There were also ex gratia compensation payments made to victims during this period. The processes generally lacked full transparency and failed adequately to ensure accountability and redress in many cases. For example, in November 2019, the President of the United States of America pardoned 3 members of the U.S. military who military courts had convicted of criminal acts in Afghanistan that amounted to war crimes. In 2016, the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force was commissioned to investigate possible breaches of law of armed conflict by members of the Special Operations Task Force from 2005 to 2016. The inquiry found credible information of 23 incidents of alleged unlawful killing of 39 individuals, as well as significant breaches of members of the Special Operations Task Group. And then in 2023, a former Australian Special Forces soldier was charged with murder, but the trial has yet to begin. In December 2022, the government of the United Kingdom established an independent statutory inquiry to investigate matters arising from the deployment of British Special Forces to Afghanistan between 2010 and 2013. And that inquiry is still ongoing. New Zealand also conducted an inquiry on Operation Burnham in Baghlan province in October 2010. And the inquiry has found conduct of New Zealand personnel to have been professional, but there had been miscalculations, failure to protect detainees. The Netherlands is also conducting investigations into different aspects of its participation in Afghanistan. We also need to address non-judicial accountability measures. I think the ICC.
Sorry, Miss Christine Cheng, we are beginning to have a problem on time, so I will ask you to end your speech, please.
Okay. Well, I do have just a few remarks to make then to close. Just to conclude, what's required for accountability in Afghanistan is a comprehensive approach, multidimensional, that needs to be carried out on different tracks. That includes both international and national mechanisms and proceedings in civilian and military courts. What's also really important to note is that what's needed is a full array of transitional justice elements, including truth-seeking, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence, including memorialization. And finally, these efforts, accountability efforts, need to be victim-centered, and they need to be gender-responsive. Thank you for letting me present a bit on the academic side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine Cheng. And I will now give the floor to Honorable Nazifa Youssoufi Bek, a parliamentarian in exile, founder of the Afghan Women Parliament in Exile. You have the floor, please.
Thank you so much for everyone. And thank you for the panelists, Ms. Fawzia Koofi and Ms. Kristan and Ms. Zohra Nawrozi, members of parliament. Thank you for the guests and about hearing about the situation of Afghanistan. For the details Kristan gave about the Afghanistan, I'm doing a brief introduction about OPLN, Afghan Women Parliamentarian and Leaders Network. When the Taliban seized power the country, we established this network in 2021. It has been 3 years. We are still working for Afghanistan. We done a lot of advocacy programs, but that is the disappointed time for us because we didn't see any change for my country. I am going for the human rights violation in Afghanistan because more details gave Ms. Fawzia Koofi and Ms. Zohra Nawrozi. I'm giving a little details, and then I have some suggestions what we should do for the Afghanistan cases. Since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in August 2021, the country has been a shared deterioration in human rights, particularly affecting women, minorities, and journalists. Women freedom have been severely restricted, including bans on secondary and higher education, limits on employment and restriction, and on movement without a male guardian. This is the bad condition of Afghanistan because our sisters, Pakistani members of parliament is there. We have the same like religion, culture, but you are working. We are in the past in the same position for now. Without a man, the woman is not allowed to go out in Afghanistan. It is very disappointing for us. Without a man guardian, created severe socioeconomic consequences to the Afghanistan remains the only country worldwide where women and girls are prohibited from attending school past primary levels. The bad thing is religious and ethnic minorities also face ongoing execution, extrajudicial killing for the past extra governments of Afghanistan, arbitrary arrests in Afghanistan, and also torture of former government employees, journalists, perceived opponent, or the Taliban imposition of strict interpretation of Islamic law. But it's not like belong our religious, but it's the extremists of the Taliban. Further, freedom of expression, assembly, leaving no space for civil society, and distinguishing voices. Many journalists have faced harassment or have been forced to flee to country. This separation of basic rights has coincided with an economic crisis, leaving over 28 million Afghans in need of humanitarian aid. International sanctions on the withdrawal of foreign aid following the Taliban takeover have compounded poverty, unemployment, and food insecurity. For Afghan citizens, these combined crises have led to increased immigration pressure, especially in neighbor countries. You know, like now our peoples, a lot of Afghani peoples living in Pakistan, they leave because of the bad situation, they leave their countries and went to the Pakistan. For now, you have a lot of community of Afghanistan and Pakistan, like human defender journalists, but this happening in because of the bad situation in Afghanistan. These ongoing abuses underscore the need or continued international pressure on the Taliban to restore human rights and enable access to basic service. Advocate call on international organizations and governments and to engage diplomatically and increase humanitarian aid through channels that do not empower the Taliban, ensuring that the assistance reaches vulnerable population directly. Since the Taliban took over in August 2021, approximately 6 million Afghans have left the country, seeking refugees worldwide. Because of the data of UNHCR, the majority have settled in Pakistan, hosting about 3.1 million Afghani refugees, and Iran accommodating around 2.2 million world population review. Smaller numbers have sought asylum in Western countries, including the United States, Canada, and various European countries. But this is not our wishes to leave our country, because everyone have a job. Like 27% of parliament was women. For now, we have lost the part of politics, but all the women denied it from the society for their work, for their job, for the opportunity. They struggle many years to empower by themselves and work for the people of Afghanistan. For now, they have nothing to do. About the justice, I'm going to about the justice system in Afghanistan. After the Taliban occupation, under the Taliban rule in Afghanistan, justice system has shifted significantly, stripping away protection for marginalized groups and enforcing a legal practice that often violate fundamental human rights. Since regaining control in 2021, the Taliban dismantled many judicial structures associated with the former Afghan government, replacing them with a system rooted in their interpretation of Islam, Sharia, heavily shaped by their ideology. But it's about the ideology of the Taliban. They are everything. They are giving an example for the Sharia, but this is not the Sharia is like the not belong the Sharia. In this framework, Taliban appointed judges handle cases with the emphasis and strict interpretation, especially for cases involving moral offense or those in a breach of Taliban mandate codes of conduct for women. These codes have led to public punishment for violations such as failing to wear the proper hijab, in addition to restriction on freedom of expression and assembly. Women girls face punishment for defying dress codes, of attempting to access education or employment outside, and those denied for such as infraction or often held without due process and reportedly subject inhuman treatment, including physical violence and discrimination for women. The Taliban justice system lacks any formal mechanism from leaders or protection for victims of abuses or discrimination, women, ethnic minorities, and religious groups are particularly vulnerable as they are systematically excluded from legal resource and decision-making process. International bodies, including the United Nations, have condemned practice on countries like Canada and Germany have initiated action with Netherlands and global countries, but we need more countries to support this statement about the ICG court to hold the Taliban accountable for breaches of international convention, especially related to discrimination and human rights abuses. The following are the concrete steps taken by the international community to make accountable human rights violation in Afghanistan. I am concrete some suggestion about the sensitive step about international accountability. Strengthening real-time monitoring and reporting channel, establish a comprehensive monitoring network, leveraging both country partners and digital technologies. This would include secure and accessible platform, allowing Afghan women and girls, vulnerable groups to report rights abuses, mobile apps, and encrypted communication channels backed by NGOs would allow individuals to document abuses without fear of this network would serve as a reliable data source for organizations like the UN and International Criminal Court and ICG, evidence-based advocacy global. This is the time for do this kind of work. Establish an Afghanistan-specific justice tribunal, rules the creation of a specialized international tribunal focus on severe rights violation by the Taliban modeled after the young Yugoslavia and Rwanda. This tribunal would focus particularly on prosecuting crimes such as gender-based violation, extrajudicial killing, and ethnic persecution with an emphasis on testimony and witness from Afghan women and ethnic minorities group. This measure would offer a pathway to justice for survivors and set a legal precedent against gender-based discrimination and abuse. The third suggestion, increase targeted sanction and regional diplomatic pressure. Extend targeted sanction against Taliban leaders responsible for human rights abuses with a focus on the enforcing restrictive policies against women rights, promotes to unified response within regional and international bodies, including the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and diplomatically isolated the Taliban until they meet established human rights standards. Collaboration with regional partners will amplify pressure and support coordinating human rights response in Afghanistan crisis. This is a suggestion, but I am going to the some more detail because some members of parliament from Pakistan, they're here. The House of the parliament houses the power of the people of Afghanistan and the people of the country, but really our people in your country, because of the visa issue, we can't come in person to join and participate in this program. If it's possible, please take it easy for the people of Afghanistan, and maybe in this bad situation, the people in the risk inside of our country give a chance to issue visa for them, and they can, by support of you, they can out from our country. This is a big problem and issue for Afghanistan people. The other things, a lot of Afghani community, they are living in Pakistan without any support. By your lobbying, by the international level, we have some funds for the people inside of the Pakistan and support them. It's a possibility for your works and by our support together. Thank you so much for your time. This is the time to action for the people of Afghanistan, especially for women. They haven't any right inside of my country. You believe Taliban is never changing, but it is like our families members, everyone is inside of the country because of their risk of the Taliban. They are hiding all the times. This is the time to action. Maybe if we not clear action for the Taliban extremist religious group, then they change it for the neighbor countries. They come the same, like the same situation in your countries. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nazifa Youssoufi Bek. We are all sorry that you cannot be here in Islamabad with us, but please be sure that you are in our thoughts and in our hearts. I will now give the floor to Dr. Evelyn Ohab. She is a senior program lawyer from the International Bar Association. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. As it happens with people who speak the last, one of the last people, a lot was already covered during our session. So I will scrap my speech and I will try to fill the gaps or comment on certain issues that were already mentioned by previous speakers. And indeed, I will start with focusing on on justice and accountability avenues for Afghan women, but also I will comment on certain things that were mentioned by Zohra in terms of the situation of the Hazara in Afghanistan, what Fawzia mentioned about gender apartheid as well. Yesterday and also earlier today, we discussed quite a bit about the fact that of course the ICC can get involved, but only if domestic courts are not being involved. And this is because of the principle of complementarity. So I will start with the domestic legal system in Afghanistan and trying to look into what exactly can be done. And we've heard already from Christine that, for example, when the Taliban took over, the Taliban removed all the legal provisions that existed there prior to the Taliban takeover. And actually, much more happened at the time when the Taliban took over. And indeed, the whole legal system was dismantled by the Taliban. And that included also firing all prosecutors. That included also not reissuing, practicing certificates for lawyers. And of course, women lawyers, women prosecutors, women judges were all removed from their offices. So currently, as it stands, there are no female legal professionals in Afghanistan who are able to work and practice. And of course, this has a massive effect on access to justice for women in general. And I will tell you some of the testimonies that we've heard over recent months from Afghanistan in a moment. And something what was mentioned also, I believe, by Fawzia Jan, she mentioned the new laws that were introduced only a few months ago. And indeed, women are not allowed to speak in public right now. And during a roundtable with Afghan women that we had in the UK Parliament just last week, we were also told that this ultimately also affects the engagement of women with court proceedings, because women are not allowed to speak in public. So they cannot be witnesses, they cannot appear in court, and only few, I believe it was last week, there was another decision issued that said that women cannot even talk between each other. So women have no rights whatsoever. And indeed, when we talk about the situation of Afghan women, we're talking about the worst situation for women in the world. There is no comparison with any other part of the world. This is the worst situation in the world. And that's the reason, for example, why scholars, lawyers, campaigners, women from Afghanistan and other countries talk about this situation being comparable to apartheid, as it was in South Africa back in the day. And I will mention about it briefly in a moment as well. And I'll just now tell you a short story. And this was a testimony that we heard during an inquiry that we had in the UK Parliament earlier this year. And one young woman joined us from Afghanistan via Zoom and told us that she's been working with one very young woman who was abused by her husband, and she wanted to report it to the police. And pre-Taliban takeover, that would have been possible. That would have been perfectly fine, because of course there were laws on domestic violence. There were mechanisms to support women who were victims of domestic violence. But as she wanted to report domestic violence, she was told that she has two options. One, to end up in jail, or two, go back to her husband and apologize. And that was the end of the story. So this just tells you how it works right now in Afghanistan. So again, all the laws are gone. All the prosecutors, lawyers who used to practice in Afghanistan, majority of them are all gone, and women are gone from the legal profession. Again, this affects women's access to justice. So in terms of domestic options for women who are subjected to this kind of restrictions and suppression of rights, there are no domestic options. There are no domestic options. And that's the reason, of course, the International Criminal Court also is proceeding with the investigations, because based on the principle of complementarity, there's nothing that is being done in Afghanistan to address the situation of women. And indeed, the Office of the Prosecutor is looking into the issue of gender persecution. This is one of the priorities for the Office of the Prosecutor in the case of Afghanistan. And the Office of the Prosecutor is also reaching out to organizations supporting women in Afghanistan, organizations collecting evidence, is reaching out to victims and survivors to make sure that they have access to the testimonies of the women who are subjected to this kind of treatment in Afghanistan. And also with the International Bar Association, we've been in touch with the Office of the Prosecutor, looking into whether we can act as intermediary with some of the victim survivors who testified in the UK Parliament early in the year, but also trying to identify some of the experts who could potentially also provide evidence to the Office of the Prosecutor as they proceed with the investigations. And just as I mentioned, last week we had a parliamentary roundtable with Afghan women, and this was to hear a little bit more what is currently happening to Afghan women, following from the inquiry that we did earlier this year. And this was the first roundtable with Afghan women that we had that followed the new laws that were introduced in August this year. And the laws, of course, they are for the general public, but there are certain provisions that affect women specifically. And I mentioned to you already the fact that women are not allowed to speak in public. So that's one of the new provisions, as if all the decrees that were introduced over the last 3 years were not enough. Now the new law limits women and prevents women from speaking in public. I mentioned to you how it affects women who would like to appear in court, for example, but also it limits women who would like to protest against this suppression of rights. And again, I already mentioned to you as well that women cannot now even speak between each other. And during the roundtable that we had, we also heard about cases of rape and sexual violence, including in detention, but also the use of forced abortions when, of course, this rape and sexual violence result in pregnancy. And we're talking about women who have been in detention also for several months. So they've been subjected to horrific abuse for those several months, whether it's rape and sexual violence or torture. We received testimonies of women who told us about the use of nails being inserted under their fingernails. And of course, as we know, this causes horrific pain and suffering. And this was again to break those women so that they would not protest next time. So this is something what we've been also working on. And indeed, we are currently working with a professor from the United States and several lawyers in putting together Article 15 communication to the ICC. Article 15 communication is a way to engage the Office of the Prosecutor, to engage the ICC with evidence of international crimes that they could consider as they investigate various situations. And we'll be launching this communication later in the year. But anyone can submit evidence to the ICC, can engage the ICC. And indeed, this is something what we've been encouraging victims, survivors, organizations supporting Afghan women to reach out to the ICC. The more evidence they have, the more likely it is that they will actually proceed with those investigations and prosecutions as soon as possible. So this is just a brief comment on the ICC to add to what Christine said. And then, of course, we need to, again, consider all the tools in the toolbox, and then we can talk about the International Court of Justice. And again, Christine mentioned already CEDAW and how 4 wonderful countries are looking into, indeed, engage the International Court of Justice for violations of CEDAW. And apart from the 4 countries that are thinking about those proceedings, there are over, I think, 20 that are already supporting those efforts, not as co-parties to the proceedings, but ultimately expressing their support that this is the way forward. And then Zohra mentioned the situation of the Hazara. And a few years ago, several politicians in the UK Parliament were looking into the situation of the Hazara in Afghanistan and looking at the atrocities against the Hazara, which were at the time at increase following the Taliban takeover, and looking at them, comparing and looking whether the atrocities amount to the legal definition of genocide in Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. And the conclusion was that there are definitely certain elements there, and this situation has to be monitored, has to be looked into. And indeed, there are legal avenues that can be taken just to examine this issue further. And one of the recommendations was to engage the International Court of Justice for violations of the Genocide Convention, exactly as the Gambia did with Myanmar. And we mentioned that before. Unfortunately, for now, there have been no states coming forward to initiate such proceedings. But nonetheless, this is an option to examine whether the Taliban are in violation of Article 1 of the Genocide Convention. And this is something that should be looked into at some point. Also, Christina mentioned universal jurisdiction, and this is something that also is one of the projects that I've been working on. And there is a new publication looking specifically into the use of universal jurisdiction to prosecute the Taliban. And it was published by scholars in Australia, including Azadeh Raz, who's an Afghan scholar, currently finishing her PhD in Australia. And again, it explains how domestic courts around the world could prosecute the Taliban for the international crimes. And one of the examples, of course, it was also mentioned that Germany and German courts have been playing a very active role in investigating, prosecuting international crimes, including secure the first conviction for genocide as committed by Daesh fighter in Iraq. But they've been very forthcoming also with initiating structural investigations into various situations before, of course, identifying the perpetrators, identifying who could potentially be charged with international crimes. And I won't comment on the universal jurisdiction at this stage. If there are any questions, happy to respond a little bit more, or elaborate a little bit more. In addition, I think another mechanism that should be introduced, it currently does not exist, is a mechanism to collect, preserve the evidence of all the atrocities committed in Afghanistan. And something similar to the IIIM that was mentioned earlier, the IIM, the UNITAD. So mechanisms established by the UN, whether the General Assembly, Security Council, could be established by the Human Rights Council, that would ultimately be the central point to collect all the evidence. The evidence is being collected, of course, by civil society organizations, but ultimately what is key is to ensure that the evidence, the way it is collected, the way it is preserved, could be then used in court to ensure prosecutions in the future. And sometimes when organizations collect the evidence, it does not meet the threshold. So it's not done in the right way. And this is very important because we don't want to interview victims several times because this will re-traumatize them. It should be done once, but correctly as well, to ensure that, of course, we don't re-traumatize the victim, but also we preserve the evidence and it could be used for future prosecutions. And on the topic also very briefly, when we look at the work of UNITAD was closed recently, of course, but UNITAD has been working with prosecutors in 14 different countries to work on domestic prosecutions. IIIM has been working with prosecutors in at least 12 countries to again ensure that they use the evidence and prosecute the perpetrators. I'm being told that I don't have much time, so just very brief comments. What I mentioned about the ICC, but also it applies to universal jurisdiction. With both cases, we've seen that there is incredible collaboration between victims, survivors, and those, whether ICC or domestic bodies prosecuting international crimes. And this is key. We talked yesterday about politicization of the system, but if victims and survivors are involved and they drive this work, I think this is one way of addressing the issue. And we've seen wonderful examples how victim survivors have been a part of the process. Wanted to mention also very briefly the non-legal important initiatives that we need to keep in mind. And one of them is, of course, that our words must be followed by actions. And that means that, for example, when we talk about situation of Afghan women, and if we have and if we want to fight for the rights of Afghan women, we then cannot have, for example, Doha 3 conducted without participation of women. We cannot prioritize the engagement of the Taliban, excluding women from those conversations, excluding civil society organizations. And it applies to many other situations. For example, if we want international justice and accountability, we cannot be trading with countries perpetrating international crimes or training militaries with them and so on. So a number of things that we always have to keep in mind. And very briefly on gender apartheid. Of course, gender apartheid is currently not an international crime, or it is not mentioned, for example, in the Rome Statute. It does not have a legal definition currently as it stands. But there is a big campaign. It's called End Gender Apartheid Today. It is led by Afghan and Iranian women, and it is to ensure that we codify gender apartheid so that in the future, situations as those that currently are being perpetrated against Afghan women could be prosecuted in court as well. And there is an attempt to include gender apartheid language in the Convention against Crimes on Crimes Against Humanity, as it's being discussed in New York right now. But also we are working on an amendment to the Rome Statute that will include this language. And I've been already told off, and so I will stop here. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evelina Pohav, for your brave speech. I think you are also a champion on human rights. Thank you so much. And I will now give the floor to Honorable Sher Ali Arbab, a parliamentarian from Pakistan. Please have the floor.
There was a time not too long ago, Afghanistan was one of the most exotic destinations in the region. I come from Peshawar, which is the border city close to Afghanistan, and we share the culture, religion, quite a lot of things. A very a summer destination, Kabul, talking about Kabul, a very progressive city of culture, city of music, city of, for young people. And then the invasion happened in 1979, and then it was followed by Charlie Wilson's war. And Afghanistan ended up being a playground for two superpowers, proxy battleground. I have and so the history of the Afghan suffering did not start in the 2000s. It was in the late 70s and early 80s. during that conflict, there were 7 major organizations, Tanzeems as they would call them, supported by largely the US and partially by some of our people. And they systematically eradicated the cream and intelligentsia of the Afghan people. You see, some of the issues that we have is we speak from our perspectives, from our experiences and what we feel should be the ideal for a given country or a population. I don't know how many of you have heard the president of the ICC's speech yesterday in the UN General Assembly. Just to give you a small quote. We are only bound by the law and we do not change the course of our actions due to threats, be them political or of another nature. We will continue abiding by our mandate undeterred with integrity, determination, impartiality, independence at all times. What does this tell us? I assume that there's a lot of pressure on the International Criminal Court. And pressure is usually exerted by actors who have influence. I mean, a country with little influence cannot really exert pressure, political or otherwise. The Taliban, some say they seized power. But then I think before that seizure, there was an elaborate dialogue, discussion at Doha with the US and other allied countries. Whatever is happening in Afghanistan, especially with women, thank you. So whatever happened in Afghanistan is indeed unfortunate, especially with women. There's no doubt about that. But how do we approach it? Given that there was 20-year US presence there, some would call it an occupation, and the allies, billions being pumped in. There was a full-fledged 300,000 strong Afghan army. And I mean, a lot of concentration. There was a lot of positive things, a lot of enrollments in girls' school, a lot of positives. But I mean, one also has to sort of review and contemplate and assess what went wrong when the focus of the international community was in Afghanistan for 20 long years. That is also something that has to be sort of brought to light. Because after that, and again, when Taliban came to Kabul, they came as victors, in their perception at least. And when you come after a victory, I mean, you come with a certain mindset, and it is very difficult to change that mindset. Do we invade them again? But it hasn't worked for the last 20 years. Do you sanction them? But with sanction, it's going to be the general citizenry that will suffer. So we have to find solutions. We can't sort of bring different concepts from across the world and try and shoehorn it into Afghanistan. We have to understand the realities. There's a very interesting point mentioned by the Honorable Fawzia Kufi. She said, if I have to negotiate with the Taliban again, I'll do so, if that means peace and prosperity in the country. So that is some of the ways one can look at it, because it has not worked greatly for the last 2 decades. The 20 years, if you look at it, one can also, because since I live very close across, there's a lot of insights that I have, but I mean, it will take more than 10 minutes to convey and then sort of develop that kind of an understanding for people who are not very well versed with Afghanistan. And then there are also, again, concerns of pressure on the ICC. The case in point, I think the Trump administration tried to sanction the ICC. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it was because of certain incidences of US military accused of involved in execution of citizens. And again, that pressure was somewhat sustained. The Taliban regime, for all its flaws, atrocities, human rights violations, must be held to account, no doubt. But that application also has to come to the more powerful countries, whether it is the US, whether it is the UK, or all of other countries, because you can't selectively apply justice, because that will have major issues of credibility of these international organizations, which have been created specifically to address the issues of inequality. I believe a country which does not have a lot of clout in the international arena should look to institutions like the ICJ and the ICC to provide them with justice. Atrocity is an atrocity, whether it is perpetrated by the Taliban, by a foreign military unit, or anybody for that matter. Also, I think there are also, and I think I touched upon it yesterday, concerns about the time taken by investigations. And obviously, there are also, as one of the speakers, I think it was Ms. Christine Chung, she mentioned about some of these incidences which governments have also sort of prosecuted New Zealand, UK, of their soldiers committing certain crimes. So important is to engage, unless there are two ways of doing it. Either you engage or you invade. That has already happened. That avenue has been exhausted for 20 years. I mean, we were in a conference in Hungary. And I mean, I asked this key question. I mean, they were talking about Taliban being very atrocious to women, perfectly fine. But how on earth did a ragtag group of fighters sustain a 20-year conflict and ended up being in power? The US and the Allied forces literally giving it into them and then sort of going out, taking those C-130s and those other Globemasters planes and sort of leaving. It happened exactly like this after the Russian withdrawal. because at that time, it was the US policy to sort of contain the Russian expansion. And after the Russian withdrawal, interests came down. And with that lack of interest, certain international institutions also perhaps did not take as much interest as it should. So again, justice must be seen being dispensed. I think we have to be, again, very honest about these things. And we have to address the Afghan problem by understanding the Afghan realities. Without that, we'll end up going in the same path that has cost many lives, many $1 billion, and heaps of opportunities over the last 20 years. A peaceful Afghanistan is in our interest, in Pakistan interest, because it gives us access not only to Afghan markets, but also to Central Asian countries. I've noted this point, and I convey it to our colleagues in the government to look into the visa problems that Afghans face at the borders. There are a lot of facilities that we've done. I'll quote some statistics. We have been given about 3,000 scholarships, 1,500 of which has been to Afghan girls since a number of years. Recently, those have been increased to 4,000. Our Pakistan-Afghanistan Friendship Group recently, since 2018, have had a number of activities, a number of deliverables, which includes optimization of transit trade agreement, reducing transport time from 30 to 3 days, liberal and facilitative visa regime put in place, improved mechanism for dignified visa processing, construction of state-of-the-art international transit trade management system at Torkham and Chaman borders, Torkham being Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Chaman being Balochistan. New policy allowing Afghans to open bank accounts in Pakistan and granted driving licenses. I think since the Russian invasion, Pakistan has in addition to accepting the Afghan refugees in the millions, have also been a much cordial host, in the sense that if you look, especially in the northern parts of Pakistan, most of the thriving businesses across are owned by Afghans. I don't think many countries, at least in the region, have been able to match this. Yes, there are probably sections of people within Afghanistan who would conveniently and wholly and solely blame Pakistan for what has happened, which obviously I think we have also paid a price for standing with our Afghan brothers and sisters. Because of the Russian conflict, invasion, the Soviet invasion, we've also had our fair share of spillover of weapons of war. I remember growing up in the 70s. In our city in Peshawar, not a day went by when there was not a bombing attack. Literally. So we have also bore the brunt of the Afghan conflict. And despite our limited resources, we have been very, very cordial and liberal in facilitating our Afghan brothers and sisters. And I think it is in our interest, and it is with our active participation, not exclusion, that we'll be able to have long-lasting peace in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Sher Ali Arbab. We are going to cut the coffee break, and we still have in our panel Dr. Matthias Ellman, that we are going to hear before opening the debate. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll keep it extremely short because I'm a bit of an just added person here, and I don't have a full presentation. And I'm not a doctor, by the way, so I'm just a regular person. But thank you for the kind note. I just wanted to, and also, for instance, Ms. Chung explained very well the procedural background on the Afghanistan situation in the ICC. So there is indeed an active investigation of the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC into the situation in Afghanistan. And in the latest annual report of the court, the Prosecutor's Office had said that some of the investigative priorities of the Office of the Prosecutor include systematic discrimination and persecution, and the Prosecutor's Office has integrated gender experts into the investigation team with a view to ensuring that the gender dimension of the alleged crimes is addressed. I wanted to emphasize this because there's been a lot of talk about the position and the suffering of women and girls in Afghanistan. So the gender aspect is one of the investigative priorities of the ICC's Office of the Prosecutor. And also in the report, the Prosecutor's Office states that the progress made, and indeed so they say that they have been conducting major investigative activities and have made progress with the investigation. And then there's the final sentence says that the progress made should establish a foundation for applications for warrants of arrest. Since I don't work for the Prosecutor's Office myself, I can't really add anything what is beyond what is in that public report. But I do also want to say that we have materials on the ICC situation translated into Dari and Pashto, which are available on the ICC's website, and I can provide the links to anyone who is interested. So we do always try to make information available to the affected populations. And maybe while I have the floor, just on the previous earlier question on capacity building and the ICC. So the court itself does not really have resources to sort of engage in systematic capacity building, but we definitely support, first of all, always the efforts of national jurisdictions to address the crimes of the Rome Statute through the prosecution, police, courts, and other judicial mechanisms in the national systems. And in the Assembly of States parties of the Rome Statute, there is actually a platform for complementarity where states can make a submission, a confidential submission, where they can indicate their capacity building needs. And then the Secretariat of the Assembly will contact the court and relevant states and organizations in a confidential manner to try to find entities that can assist that state which had requested some assistance so that they could meet their capacity building needs. So there is a mechanism through which assistance can be requested and hopefully also those needs can be met. And the court can in principle share its expertise. So while we don't have any funds to actually launch some kind of systematic training program, but we can always share our expertise. And the Office of the Prosecutor has made it very clear that where there are genuine national proceedings, they in principle are willing to facilitate access to also to evidence which they hold in their possession. So it's definitely the spirit for supporting national proceedings is there. I think I'll stop there and happy to take any questions later if necessary.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthias Elman. We are now going to open the debate. Please feel free to put your questions. I think we will start there. Please.
Alex Carlisle from the UK. My view is that the potential for the Taliban negotiating over women's rights and the criminal activities against women are somewhere near nil at the present time. I think we have to be absolutely realistic. The only glimmer of negotiating capacity by the Taliban relates to trade matters, and that's a long way from the subject we're discussing. So how do we persuade the Taliban, in inverted commas for persuade, that they need to move? Well, complementarity has its uses, but one of the problems about complementarity in this context is there are very few possibilities for prosecuting potential Taliban defendants in any other country, and certainly not in Afghanistan. I do think that some very valuable points have been made in the discussion, particularly by Evelina Ochab, about evidence gathering. One of the institutions that has not yet been mentioned in the last 2 days, which I'm about to mention, is the International Investigative Media. And it seems to me that if organizations such as the ICC, the ICJ, and also NGOs like the IBA, for example, are able to work with the media in putting together the evidence which, as you, Evelina, suggested, needs to be of courtroom value, of real evidential integrity, and which brings together individual cases upon which there may be little evidence and puts them into a greater whole where one can add the sum of that evidence together, then we may, and this may be a piece of wild optimism, but we may be able to create such antipathetic publicity against the Taliban on these subjects that eventually they will become total pariahs in the political and diplomatic world and may feel that they have to make some concessions. But I do think we have to be quite hard-faced lawyers in this and concentrate on the legal mechanisms and the evidential quality that eventually brings cases before a court, wherever that court happens to be.
Thank you so much. I think there's another question here, please.
Thank you. First, I'll like to make a small comment on Fozia Kufi. She spoke very well, and where she said that the institution has collapsed. I think it's a question to answer if the institution of democracy did collapse, or was it a strategy for a retreat? I just have to make before my question a small comment, as our dear colleague mentioned here, that our doors to Afghanistan have always been open, and Pakistan has played a very important role in shaping up the relationship with Afghanistan. When we speak about Fozia Kefi was mentioning that the girls' student scholarships should be looked into in the education policy, that Pakistan has over the years provided a very continuous support to our Afghan friends and people who are based there, and around 4,000 scholarships that we were mentioning, around 1,500 of them are girls. And over 50,000 professionals or professors are educated from Pakistan who are teaching in Afghanistan and are there right now. And according to a local survey, about more than 50,000 students are based in Pakistani primary and secondary institutions that are Afghan nationals. And not only that, we've stood with Afghans through the healthcare system, and we've always, and we very strongly believe in it. We've spent over $1 billion in the healthcare sector, be it Nishtar Kidney Hospital in Jalalabad or Nadeeb Aminullah Hospital, which is more than 100 beds. And we've always, the Afghan refugees who've been here in Pakistan more than, because my constituency has a lot of them. We have a refugee camp which has been here for the longest time. If we total in Pakistan, I think more than 3 million refugees have been here, and we very strongly, our foreign office, government, very strongly believe that the women in Afghanistan should be given the rights, be it education and all other government institutions, that they're not part of it. But my question specifically is that the role of ICC, if Afghanistan becomes part of it, does the ICC have a retrospective effect? What has happened in past, or the things that have happened in past, will they be in the ambit of it? And if not, so how can it help a country like Afghanistan, where they have also faced issues, and especially with multiple times they were attacked by two different countries, one being the United States and the other being Russia over the USSR back then. So what role can ICC play in that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are about half an hour late, so one last question, please. Thank you.
Yes.
We need a microphone. Oh, sorry, there was another question before, so we will have two questions.
Thank you.
and then
Actually, I was the
we'll
first to
close.
raise my hand. Thank you so much. Please make me understand. I have three short questions. I'm from Southern Africa. We don't have this religious extremism, but make me understand, especially the honorable members who are panelists who have been on virtual. In this, the Taliban, these are bad guys, obviously, but do they have women in their structures? That's one question. If they have women in those structures, what are those women saying about what is happening? Two, my brother, what's so special about Afghanistan such that the Soviet Union was there and now the Americans were there? What's so special about Afghanistan? Then, Doc, the ICC is, and you said they were investigating a lot of happenings there in Afghanistan. Are they allowed, the prosecutor general, is he allowed to go into Afghanistan to investigate this on location? Thank you.
Thank you. And for the last question, please.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to put on record few things. See, this war against terror which Pakistan fought, we lost 80,000 lives. 80,000 lives. And the economic loss was more than $80 billion, which is about 30-40% of the national economy. Besides this, providing Afghan transit trade, because Afghan don't have a port. So we are under international obligations to provide them land routes. Providing Afghan transit trade, which reached to $2 billion, we heavily lost in terms of the smuggling, because most of these goods was coming back to Pakistan border and they was affecting the local markets. Regarding scholarship, my friend has already explained. But then we still have a special quota. There are 3 million people that are still in Pakistan. Those who are living in Pakistan, they are provided special cards to legitimate their stay. So this is few things where we Pakistanis are doing from our heart and soul to help our Afghan brothers. And then in return, we see that Taliban are attacking Pakistan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We only have 5 minutes, so I will ask the answers to be really short. Please have the word.
Sure, very briefly. In terms of evidence collection, what IBA did, IBA established this app called Eyewitness for Atrocities that enables the collection of evidence, and also the chain of custody is preserved. So this evidence can be used for future prosecutions and has been already sent to UN bodies, to the ICC and others. And the way it appears on your phone, it appears as any other app. It doesn't, and the evidence does not stay on your phone. So even if the person who collects the data is caught by, let's say, the Taliban in Afghanistan, this evidence will not be there to be used against that person. So we've been working on that already. And but of course, there is a scope for further engagement, including with any kind of media and so on, and we can look into it. Then very briefly,
sorry, we cannot take the word also to our participants from Afghanistan, and we only have 3 minutes. So 1 minute, please.
You have to understand and realize that even within Taliban, there's a lot of pressure. There are elements within the Taliban who have a little more inclination towards moderation, and then obviously there are extremist elements who want to implement a strict version of Sharia, or their interpretation of strict version Sharia. Then there is also a lot of public pressure, because when you're in government, there are a lot of expectations. And negotiating with the Taliban, one way of doing it is to sort of tie these considerations to international support, to further recognition, and to different other means. To the question why everybody invades Afghanistan, well, back it was a Russian-backed, Soviet-backed government in 1970s, and they tried to sort of exercise independence, and that instigated an invasion. And obviously, after 9/11, the US invaded a number of countries, including Afghanistan, in an attempt to make the world more safe and free from terror. So there was also an invasion back in the time of the British. It didn't work. So one has to sort of, again, I'm coming to the point that one has to understand the realities within Afghanistan to be able to address those, whether it is through negotiations, through further sanctions, trying them in third countries, and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there are some questions put to Zohra, Fawzia, and Nazifa. So I ask if they want to answer. We have closed the debate, sorry. And I'm now asking if Nazifa, Zohra, or Fawzia want to answer.
Yeah, I'm here.
Please, Nazifa.
About the, I think the question is about the scholarship, or maybe because I didn't got it, the question. Can you repeat it?
There were one very direct to the point question about women taking part in Taliban structure.
Okay. Really, when the Taliban about the voice of virtue in Afghanistan, for now the Taliban restrict of the woman voices, but I think they are not changing their, but it's better to have for now, maybe when we for the Pakistan is the neighbor of the country of Afghanistan, and also for the other countries, this is the time for how to be honest support for the women of Afghanistan. And the Taliban is never changing, and also the restriction is more in Afghanistan for the woman, but we should go together for the ICC and also maybe the ICG about the cases. Christiana gave all the details about the cases, and it's the time for action for the when the MPs gave a detail for the education the girls in Pakistan. Really, we are thankful for the Pakistani neighbors and for the supporting of Afghanistan.
Thank you. I think we must close this panel. I must thank very much all the participants, but you will understand that I ask for a special applause to Zohra, Fawzia, and Nazifa, who cannot be with us today. And we will now move to the next panel, please.
Hi, I'm really sorry to play here the bad cop, but there's no time for the coffee break that was in the agenda. So we'll move immediately to the last panel. Thank you.
Okay.
Ushers. Hi, Zalim.
Colgate.
They don't give liberty. Liberty is seized. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Good afternoon, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists, our distinguished guests, fellow honorable members. As we conclude today's discussions, please pay much attention to another very important topic. But before we proceed, may we rise up from our seats and stretch at least just a minute. Let's stretch up. Yeah, it has been a very long day. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable members. Welcome once again. Our topic for discussion this afternoon is on the future opportunities for international criminal justice. However, before we go further, it is important for us to visit the current challenges that being faced globally. And at the same time, we should also come up with the strategies to address the pressing issues faced by global community. I guess it will not serve any purpose to brainstorm on future opportunities when we have endless wars in some countries. Women are being abused and killed. Unfortunately, those capable to bring peace are just watching. What is more worrying is that the majority of our citizens that bear the consequences are women and children. We cannot just sit and watch our innocent citizens being killed, property being destroyed. Honestly, it's very sad. So during our discussion, we need to come up with strategies that can map the way forward on the topic, future opportunities for international criminal justice. Allow me to introduce you our esteemed panelists. We have Ms. Mami Tusan, member of European Parliament, France. Is also the Vice President for Group of the Greens, European Free Alliance, initiator of the Ecocide Alliance, and also she is the PGA member. She's joining us virtually. We have also Oliver Bemanju Ago, MP from Cameroon, chair of the PGA Cameroon National Group. We have Mr. Ali Esas, MP from Canada, chairpersons all-party parliamentary group for the prevention of genocide and other crimes against humanity, who is also chairperson for PGA Canada National Group and a board member. And we have Mr. Sheikh For, associate legal officer, Trust Fund for Victims at the International Criminal Court. And finally, we have Honorable Kerba Jallo, MP from Gambia, my brother right here, who is also PGA member. And virtually, we have also Mr. Quinn, who is coordinating legal advisor, Minister of Justice and Security of Netherlands. I'll keep on introducing some panelists as we go on. That's all? That's all? Okay. My sincere apologies to my sister, Honorable MP from Zimbabwe, Honorable Consilia Nazavana from Zimbabwe. Welcome to the panel, Madam Navavan. Thank you so much. Allow me to ask Ms. Mari Twasin to come up with her remarks. I thank you. The floor is open. It's a visual one. Madam Mari, the floor is yours.
The video one.
Okay. Are you ready? We'll proceed with those who are here.
Yes. No? So, video statements.
Yes.
Yes.
Video statements. Are you ready? Huh? It's not on the panel. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Opportunité donnée par les Parliamentarians for Global Action.
We can start with
Je vais m'adresser à vous pour vous parler d'un combat crucial qui va bouleverser la justice pénale internationale. C'est le combat pour la reconnaissance du crime d'écocide. Le droit international est au cœur. Bonjour. Je voudrais utiliser l'opportunité donnée par les Parliamentarians for Global Action, que je remercie, de m'adresser à vous pour vous parler d'un combat crucial qui va bouleverser la justice pénale internationale.
Okay, it's ready. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Proceed.
Bonjour. Je voudrais utiliser l'opportunité donnée par les Parliamentarians for Global Action, que je remercie, de m'adresser à vous pour vous parler d'un combat crucial qui va bouleverser la justice pénale internationale. C'est le combat pour la reconnaissance du crime d'écocide. Le droit international est au cœur de tous les espaces de discussion politique, en particulier depuis l'invasion russe de l'Ukraine, les attaques du Hamas le 7 octobre ou le risque de génocide à Gaza. Mais jusqu'à présent, la communauté internationale n'a pas reconnu un aspect essentiel de ces guerres, à savoir les pertes considérables subies par la nature et tout ce que cela entraîne comme conséquence pour les êtres humains qui dépendent évidemment de la santé de la nature. Aujourd'hui, le statut de Rome, qui définit le droit pénal international, contient plusieurs dispositions relatives aux crimes de guerre qui protègent l'environnement naturel. Mais une seule mentionne spécifiquement l'environnement et le protège indépendamment des dommages humains à son article 8. Cet article n'a pourtant jamais été invoqué malgré les multiples opportunités de le faire. Mais surtout, ces crimes contre l'environnement ne sont pas reconnus en temps de paix. Or, l'écocide peut advenir en temps de paix et a évidemment lui aussi des conséquences pour l'humanité. La reconnaissance de l'écocide est un combat porté depuis de très nombreuses années, plus de 50 ans, par des défenseurs et des défenseuses de l'environnement, évidemment, des citoyennes, des citoyens, mais aussi des magistrats, des avocats, des professionnels du droit, rassemblés notamment autour du mouvement international Stop Ecocide on Earth. L'objectif, c'est que la reconnaissance internationale des crimes d'écocide, c'est-à-dire les crimes les plus graves commis contre l'environnement, en temps de guerre comme en temps de paix, puisse être portée dans le statut de Rome. Cette reconnaissance des plus graves crimes contre l'environnement permettrait de rendre pénalement responsables ceux dont les actions entraînent de graves dommages environnementaux, tels que les déversements massifs de pétrole ou de produits chimiques, des coupes rases de forêts tropicales primaires qui sont en train de partir en fumée, ou la destruction de réseaux fluviaux tout entiers. Ce ne sont que des exemples. On peut en trouver d'autres, comme par exemple l'utilisation du chlordécone en Martinique et en Guadeloupe pendant plusieurs décennies, alors que ce produit était de toute connaissance dangereux et nocif. Ces dernières années, nous avons obtenu des progrès très importants pour atteindre ces objectifs avec les parlementaires mobilisés partout autour de la planète. Déjà, l'Union européenne a posé les bases de la reconnaissance de l'écocide dans sa nouvelle directive européenne sur la criminalité environnementale. Dans les 2 ans qui viennent, tous les États membres de l'Union européenne doivent transposer cette directive et nous allons travailler à ce qu'ils y reconnaissent effectivement et explicitement le crime d'écocide. Et puis, le débat se porte aussi sur la scène internationale, puisqu'il y a quelques semaines, Vanuatu, les Fidji et les Samoa ont proposé un amendement pour inscrire l'écocide dans le statut de Rome au sein du groupe de travail amendement de la Cour pénale internationale. C'est la première étape, cet amendement, pour aboutir à la reconnaissance de l'écocide à la CPI et donc à travers le monde entier. Les prochains mois et années vont être cruciaux pour que ce combat puisse aboutir. Et j'espère que vous serez à nos côtés pour le mener. J'ai créé l'Alliance des parlementaires pour la reconnaissance de l'écocide en 2020, qui rassemble tous les parlementaires d'Europe, d'Amérique, du Nord ou du Sud, d'Afrique, d'Asie, qui sont engagés par la reconnaissance de ce crime. Alors, si vous voulez nous rejoindre, rendez-vous sur ecocidealliance.org et merci au PGA pour l'invitation. Merci à vous toutes et tous de votre attention et en attendant que vous nous rejoigniez. À bientôt.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. The floor. Allow me to invite Honorable Oliver Venju-Ago, MP from Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for recognizing me. Before I take on my remark, permit me, and in line with previous speakers, to join my voice to congratulate the government of Pakistan for this wonderful initiative for hosting this PGA forum. I want to commit myself from what we have been hearing and from what I've seen here, that going back, I count myself as an ambassador for Pakistan, because the reality is completely different from the narrative that is being given out there on the media. I have been able to feed my eyes with myself. So I want again to say thank you very much, the people of Pakistan. In the rapid evolving landscape of global affairs, international criminal justice stands out as criminal pillar for ensuring accountability, upholding human rights, and promoting the rule of law. The international criminal justice is therefore that area where it is concerned with the prosecution of some of the world's most serious and human rights abuses, such as genocide, war crime, torture, terrorism, human trafficking, and now cyber crimes. As we enter an area characterized by unprecedented technological advancement, shifting geopolitical dynamics, and complex transitional threat, the future of international criminal justice becomes a subject of utmost importance. Hence, this conversation delves into involving nature of crimes such as human trafficking and slavery, new emerging technologies, related crimes, especially negative generated artificial intelligence systems manifested in the form of misinformation and disinformation, the complexity of global cooperation, and the imperative of equitable and accessible justice system. Before dwelling into the future opportunities for international criminal justice, it is but necessary to briefly look at the evolution of criminal justice system. Over the course of history, the development of international criminal justice system has been marked by significant milestones from the post-World War II, Nuremberg and Tokyo tribunals, to the establishment of International Tribunal for Rwanda, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The international criminal justice has gradually evolved. These tribunals paved the way for the creation of the International Criminal Court in 2002, which is a permanent institution designed to prosecute individuals responsible for the most heinous crimes. Thus, the evolution of international criminal justice reflects a growing recognition for the need of a global mechanism to address most atrocities and ensure accountability. Human trafficking forms part of the myriad of emerging challenges faced by international criminal justice in today's global landscape. It is transnational crime that presents complex jurisdictional issues and requires enhanced international cooperation. The rise of human trafficking poses unique challenges in investigating and prosecuting these crimes committed across borders and within states. The threat of it and other crimes such as terrorism and cybercrime demands innovative approaches in addressing the complex webs across involved. Also, a concerted effort is needed to dismantle the networks and ensure accountability in both domestic and international contexts. We will have to look 4 points, and my first point is improvement in complementary and national jurisdiction. A lot has been said about complementary, but the principle of complementarity lies at the core of international criminal justice. It recognizes the primary jurisdiction of national legal system in prosecuting international crime, with international court serving as the last resort, as we have been hearing since yesterday. The second is transitional justice. This refers to the process and mechanism used to address past human rights violations and promote reconciliation in societies transforming from conflict. Thus, the future opportunities for international criminal justice lies in the creation of more truth commission, like we saw in Rwanda, and criminal prosecution, reparation programs, and institution reforms. Transitional justice serves to acknowledge victims' experiences, provide a historical record, promote accountability, and foster societal healing. Third, impunity and accountability. In order to overcome impunity, there must be accountability and cooperation between nations, because sometimes behind this crime lies powerful men and organizations. Strengthening international legal framework and empowering international national jurisdiction are vital steps towards combating impunity. Fourth, witness protection and victim participation. Witness protection and victim participation are crucial aspects of international criminal justice proceeding. Witness protection programs aims to ensure the safety of individuals who provide crucial testimony should be encouraged and guaranteed. Effective protection measures safeguard witnesses from potential reprisal, intimidation, and other threats. Lastly, improvement in international relations. Cooperation among states and international organizations play a vital role in investigating and prosecuting international crime. Mutual legal instance, extradition, and sharing of information and evidences are vital for effective cross-border investigation for crimes like human trafficking, cybercrime. Cybercrime, as we know, is a borderless crime. This can go a long way in achieving meaningful international criminal justice. The future of international criminal justice requires a concerted effort to adapt to emerging challenges, embrace innovative approaches, and build a more inclusive and effective system for achieving justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Indeed, these are some of the issues that will be the subject for our discussion this afternoon. At this juncture, allow me to invite Honorable Ali Esasi, Chairperson of All Interparliamentary Group, who is also addressing us virtually. Welcome, Honorable Ali. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you, Oliver, for your remarks. I wish I could have been in Pakistan, but unfortunately, due to other commitments, I couldn't make it. But I'm sure that under the leadership of Naveed, you're all having a tremendous time, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Now, you've asked me to speak to the future opportunities that can be seized by the global community and indeed by our members in the area of international criminal justice. And allow me to say that against the dizzying backdrop of developments in global affairs, international criminal justice, as Oliver reminded us, remains critically important for ensuring accountability, upholding human rights, and promoting the rule of law. Over the course of history, the development of international criminal justice has been marked by very significant milestones. Of course, we had the Nuremberg and the Tokyo tribunals, which established in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. We had that, and then we had the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. All of these milestones certainly paved the way for the creation of the International Criminal Court. The evolution that we have been experiencing in the area of international criminal justice certainly reminded us all of the need to have a global mechanism to address mass atrocities and to ensure accountability. As a permanent institution, the ICC was designed to prosecute individuals responsible for the most heinous crimes. The International Criminal Court stands as the first permanent tribunal mandated to investigate and prosecute individuals accused of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Established by the Rome Statute, the ICC operates on the basis of principles of complementarity and jurisdiction over both state parties and non-state parties when crimes occur in their jurisdiction. Yet, emerging trends and challenges are certainly changing the trajectory of international criminal justice. Living as we do during an era of shifting global dynamics, of technological advancement, and numerous transnational threats, the salience of international criminal justice remains as important and as steadfast as ever, but it's important that we also embrace change. So the aim of strengthening the international justice framework remains ongoing. Among the most significant recent developments are negotiations surrounding the codification of crimes against humanity. Now, many of you are aware that these negotiations have been going on for some time, but just recently in October, we witnessed quite a bit of consensus on the need to codify crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity, of course, refer to crimes committed as part of widespread or systematic attacks against a civilian population. Therefore, unlike war crimes, crimes against humanity can occur during peace or wartime. These are essentially the crimes that shock the conscience of humanity. The 15 forms of crimes against humanity listed in the Rome Statute include offenses such as the following: murder, torture, enslavement, sexual violence, persecution, apartheid, forcible transfer of populations, and enforced disappearance. Crimes against humanity, I'd like to remind everyone, is a worldwide phenomenon. Just to take the past 10 years alone, human rights organizations have produced evidence of such crimes in at least 18 countries. Yet, unlike other crimes under international law, such as genocide or war crimes, there is presently no standalone convention that enumerates crimes against humanity. A convention on crimes against humanity would make it much harder for perpetrators to escape justice. Now, the UN Sixth Legal Committee, which met in New York from October 9th and 14th this year, was charged to meet for 2 years to exchange views on the draft articles on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity adopted by the International Law Commission in 2019. So many states decided to speak that one day of scheduled meetings spilled over into 3. Negotiations on the draft resolution are bound to be tough, but the overwhelming support for the draft treaty expressed in the public debate several weeks ago is likely to shift the tide in favor of concrete decision-making. What is required is an agreement on a timetable to move forward. It's now time for the member states of the UN to make good on their commitments and to bring these negotiations from the drawing board to reality. An accountability vacuum exists. It's important that crimes against humanity be codified, and that's why we should all endeavor to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ali. Thank you. Honorable members, let's just keep our questions and comments for the sake of time. Allow me to invite Mr. Sher for Associate Legal Officer, Trust Fund for Victims at the International Criminal Court. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that we're tired. I just need your attention for a few minutes. So I'll start maybe by asking you a question, simple question. We have been speaking so far very extensively about punitive justice. Victims are not a tick box that we can use as an additional word to add when discussing about justice in general. They deserve, as a matter of right, to see their harm redressed. And I would like, just before starting, to agree on the fact that, to check whether we agree on that. Yes? Yes, it's very relevant for what I'll be saying later. Thank you very much. Now, I don't want to speak too long, especially about something that I can never transmit in words. And that's why I would prefer to maybe show a video for a short amount of time before adding just a few words, still within the 10 minutes that I was granted. Yeah, thank you.
Ils sont arrivés ici à Sibut un vendredi, le 14 comme ça, février 2003. 1h du matin comme ça, nous trouvions dans notre campement et ils m'ont pris en otage pour aller me faire le viol. Ils sont 5 sur moi. Lorsqu'ils m'ont baisé, là, c'est tout le monde qui s'est au courant. C'est pas en cachette. Là, c'est inoubliable. Vraiment.
J'ai pris cette photo parce que ça me rappelle toujours la mort de mon papa, que je ne peux pas oublier. Les Bayamolenge eux-mêmes ont pris mon papa, ils l'ont tué, l'enterré dans une latrine. C'est à ce moment que je suis parmi eux pour faire creuser une tombe. Ils m'ont violé et m'ont contaminé. Donc c'est un choc dur pour moi.
Photo so mbiye kite mbiye ni mingi ngata ke photo ki pasi mbisu mbibana tonti événement. Tawa mina essayer ki boto mina gigi Na mimi dekongo so mbena ko lo mutu lo gi crossing company lo tochina yanga mi kitembi mbi dekongo ko yanga mi kitembi kanga yanga mbi da na place la sala gala sai singa nguna termi don pembe mi kwa ki avoko adu singa ko mati sigi tuku ni la pembe mi kwa abuba na yani geret mi kwa abuba mombi nganga ki sango na pe simbi ki duchina pe ko chala so.
C'est là qu'on a fui, c'est notre campement. Même si je mets mes enfants continuent à garder cette place comme vraiment une place que leurs mères ont perdu sa valeur. On m'a enterré ici. C'est comme mon cimetière, quoi.
Ndaki sombi fa pembe ni misula. Big sap sombi ka india na popo chamba mbi ala kwa kiten ai kanda pembe no ki ton so bon big sana ndina ti giginda ang bana ti penser ndandi.
J'ai eu l'appui de la main de ces pays par l'intermédiaire de la DCA. C'est ça qui m'a permis de réfectionner la tombe de mon papa que vous voyez ça. Donc je veux l'honorer parce que si c'est pas la guerre, il doit rester en vie jusqu'à ce jour.
À présent, les bases yembi mingi adembi qui respectent tchiachi yongo yorot ni mingi. Gamundi ala muna ala use asasi. Ambe parti mbi découvrir que ba tenba que son mingi mignon yoro jamais mignon yoro. Tenba kaya pasas mbi kuna hôpital asa dépistage mbi agas awara eso virus sida intéresse mbi. Quand je lance ton qualité copie so idée de réfléchir qui binia te wa de fater binia te an de fater ndako ina société ndako somingi simbi ça dépistage mbi a conseiller quoi que ta so mu wango na yi atonga ndosi ngo wango so munambi asasi mbi ma wango ni a commencer munambi yoro commencer yoro si ces pays à mon bord on a DCA à bilan en dossier face à la mon encore wangoni ma wangoni en biti oroti mini akatonga na gigi mbila négligé na pe heure na limbi net million et puis à tout y quoi son bina besoin si sarangon biki sarang bi ke na ngango et puis bi kono pendre zo agonda mbate ba bi kono pendre bi nyo yoro na lege na bi kono pendre zo ite tena so mbiga za ndoti photo mbi so me musora.
Thank you very much. The video is much longer, but in the interest of time, I won't continue. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the impact of the activities of the Trust Fund for Victims at the International Criminal Court. This is because, and I mentioned it earlier, there are two pillars to the Rome Statute. It's not only about prosecuting and convicting. It's also about repairing victims. And the reality is that there has been an imbalance in the way states have been addressing prosecution as such and trial and reparations as such. And that is why it's important at this stage. And I think I can already not take much more time and go to something very concrete. And I'm very sorry. I'm already anticipating on something that shouldn't be anticipated on. I would like to propose to you when discussing about your action plan, that you also consider having a separate sentence for the second pillar of the Rome Statute legal system, urging the national government to advance national policies and to provide the Trust Fund for Victims at the ICC with the necessary voluntary contributions to ensure that the harm suffered by victims are redressed. Whether we consider double standard or not, victims are victims wherever they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheikh, for your contributions, and we really appreciate your touching video. Honorable members, these are the issues that our people are facing out there. So let's brainstorm after the panelists have done their presentation. At this juncture, allow me to invite Honorable Consilia Zohra MP from Zimbabwe, who is also a PGA member. Welcome. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you, our moderator and chairperson, distinguished colleagues and delegates, as well as appreciating the Secretariat of the PGA and the board in general for allowing me to be here and to present on such important issues that we face all as the world. I would also like to appreciate the Parliament of Pakistan, our host, for the excellent service for us to be here and have a home away from home as we do this business. Distinguished delegates, as a system, international criminal justice is dependent on the willingness of individual governments to cooperate with each other and with relevant international institutions such as the ICC. International justice then means ensuring accountability for some of the most serious crimes, genocides, crimes against humanity, war crimes, torture, and enforced disappearances. This is an elephant that is in the room. As a member state, Zimbabwe, yes, there is this skepticism about ratification, but that doesn't say we are also in need of future opportunities that can help us all address this scourge of international criminal justice. We still have in Zimbabwe cases that do not have closure, cases of enforced disappearances that head back to more than 10 years, some of them. No prosecutions were done, not enough investigations. I will quote one, Itai Dzamara, who we do not even know where he is now for more than 7 years. So we can say there is an elephant in the room and we need to look into this seriously. Most victims of these crimes are denied justice, if at all recognized. So there is need to interrogate possible opportunities to improve. The state or nation is taken as the central entity of concern. As we are saying, the states need to be concerned. Most states need also to ratify. And justice among nations or states is the focus. However, there are limitations to the operations of the ICJ that hinder the realization of milestones achieved, including, among others, its lack of enforceability, limited jurisdiction based on state consent, and potential bias of the judges. A key reform would be instrumental in making the ICC and the bigger project of international criminal justice stronger, more efficient, and effective, which is then the inclusion of peace negotiations and related criteria in the analysis of whether or not to pursue an investigation or prosecution. We cannot then interrogate the future opportunities without boldly analyzing the challenges to the operation of the International Court of Justice. Challenges which include a weak record system of prosecutions, discord among the court's judges, difficult state relationships, focusing on the future. In the rapidly evolving landscape of global affairs, international criminal justice stands as a critical pillar for ensuring accountability, upholding human rights, and promoting the rule of law. The aim is to illuminate the path forward for international criminal justice and inspire meaningful dialogue on the strategies needed to address the pressing issues facing our global community. Recognizing the primary jurisdiction of national legal systems in prosecuting international crimes, with international courts serving as a last resort. Hence, the principle of complementarity lies at the core of international criminal justice. Complementarity ensures that states have the responsibility and opportunity to investigate and prosecute crimes committed within their jurisdiction, regardless of their nationality or the location of the crime. Strengthening national jurisdictions through capacity building and ensuring access to justice plays a pivotal role in achieving global accountability. On strengthening international justice, the Human Rights Watch of the 17th July 2023, which is, I think, the day of the commemoration, set out 5 steps governments that can take to strengthen the international justice system and expand the reach of justice regardless of where these crimes are committed or by whom. And these are erasing double standards, meaning no one should be above the law, delivering equal justice depending on national courts doing their job, requiring constant political support, government support, and protection to human rights defenders and campaigners on the front line of justice is important. Commitment to quality, impartial justice, keeping a call on governments to take concrete actions to ensure victims equal access to justice everywhere and every day. Provision of financial resources across these accountability efforts. International law and policy should establish ecocide as well as an international crime. There is need to amend the Rome Statute to include ecocide as the 5th crime against humanity. Environmental destruction must be criminalized, addressing deforestation as a result of intensive livestock farming and agricultural and mining malpractices, water and soil pollution from chemical spills, damage to oceans caused by industrial overfishing, oil spills, and plastic pollution. The culture that has allowed for the destruction of our environment needs to be eradicated. There is a need to strengthen environmental treaties, enhancing enforcement mechanisms and penalties in treaties like the Paris Agreement and Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Develop environmental accountability frameworks, encouraging countries to adopt national laws and policies addressing ecocide. With the need to enforce mandatory environmental impact assessments that require companies to conduct thorough assessments before projects, carrying out environmental due diligence, holding companies accountable for environmental degradation they have caused. We need global cooperation that would be key, enhancing collaboration between governments, NGOs, and corporations, climate diplomacy, fostering global agreements addressing ecocide. Mining activities with no social responsibilities need to be curbed. Zimbabwe, as a case in point, suffers massive land degradation due to illicit mining activities. Also in the area of environment, the ecosystem, our head of elephant across Zimbabwe has become insurmountable as the elephant population has outgrown the carrying capacity of our national parks, calling for a review of the stringent CITES measures that disallows trade in ivory, when as a nation we are sitting on huge stockpiles of ivory which had eroded economic value in the long run. To impoverished nations whose poverty is exacerbated by human-wildlife conflict, as the people's hunger is further aggravated by destruction of crops meant for communities' survival. A consolidated while they struggle under difficult circumstances to survive alongside with the insurmountable head of elephant. A consolidated approach is necessary to curb the destruction of the natural environment, threatening human populations who are dependent on these natural resources for maintaining ecosystems and ensuring their ability to support future generations. For we need to shape the voice, as together we can build a world where everyone thrives. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable MP Consilia Chinavavwada from Zimbabwe, for a wonderful presentation. Honorable members, finally, allow me to invite Barrister Akhil Maliki, MP from Pakistan, who is also an advisor in the Ministry of Law and Justice. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Distinguished guests, honorable members of the Parliament of Pakistan, excellencies, delegates, and parliamentary officials, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. Bonjour, buenas tardes, bon dia, jumbo. Thank you. It is truly an honor to welcome all of you here in Islamabad and to discuss this important topic that we have been discussing since yesterday on the International Criminal Court and the rule of law. Of course, immense strides have been made, starting with the establishment of the ICC itself and other tribunals, which obviously has provided a framework for prosecuting crimes such as genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. But of course, as our world changes or continues to change, we too have to change the systems of justice, and we have to adapt ourselves with these changing times. The adoption of Rome Statute obviously resulted in establishing a new judicial institution, but of course, it also created a new code for the international criminal law. Now, having said that, despite its magnificent global justice agenda, the efficacy of ICC has been a subject of considerable debate, as we have seen through our discussions yesterday, and of course, much of today as well, as to the efficacy and the real purpose, and how some nations feel that they might be not really truly be benefiting from the system itself that was adopted through the Rome Statute and the establishment of the ICC. Now, the reasons, of course, for these significant challenges that surround the implementation of the Rome Statute itself, due to these variety of complex factors, and I'll just gist them down. Firstly, many of the nations, as we've seen through our discussion that has cropped up, time and again, many of the nations actually view joining the Rome Statute as a potential threat to their national sovereignty. Of course, it requires them to give up on their national jurisdiction or sovereignty to the jurisdiction of the ICC. Secondly, the perception of selective enforcement, as we've seen, because many of the members that we have seen and many of the delegates, they are a good majority of them actually are representing the African continent. And of course, we've seen, and this is what was discussed and came up in our discussions yesterday and today as well. largely focusing on the African nations concerning about the bias and the selective justice. However, thirdly, the inconsistencies in the national legal systems also pose another significant challenge because every country has its own legal system and a diverse legal tradition that we've seen world over, because obviously we've got, national laws, but of course we've got traditional religious laws as well, and some customary laws as well. So it has been very difficult for many countries to sort of align their domestic laws with the provisions of the Rome Statute itself. Fourthly, the perception of double standard, again, that's another thing that did crop up time and again in our conversations throughout, various panels and discussions, and the questions that were raised during and after the panel discussions. We've seen there's been backlash with regards to, the double standards with which allegedly in the application of the Rome Statute, particularly in developing countries where there are accusations of politicization, which has seriously undermined the court's credibility and impartiality. And finally, of course, we must acknowledge the trend of straight withdrawals, where there's been a trend where states have actually been withdrawing, as we've seen over the years. Several states that had signed the Rome Statute have chosen to withdraw, citing, distrust in the proceedings of the court itself. And of course, this raises a very important question about the ICC's ability to effectively investigate and prosecute international crimes. Overall, I will also be speaking about, since the topic sort of encompasses the future of the ICC, I will perhaps, in my individual capacity, and also being the advisor to the Ministry of Law and Justice and being a member of the Parliament, shed some light on, of course, we as a country want to be engaged in the process of seeing how we could perhaps, become a state party to the Rome Statute in the future. But of course, we want to see, because we have many countries that are now the members, of course, and we've seen the state withdrawals that have happened over the years. Now, the significant challenges that I've obviously mentioned with these complex factors of, the perception of potential threat to the national security, the perception of selective enforcement of the ICC's mandate, and the perception of and the inconsistencies with the national laws and the state withdrawals. Having said all of this, I still think that we have these opportunities for a truly global system of justice, including enhanced regional cooperation and meaningful dialogues, because obviously we do have to see it from a regional perspective as well, and not just in a global perspective, because both these perspectives are actually important to us. International forums such as PGA, IPU is another one, and there are various other international forums where we can obviously discuss and see how best, with the help of these international forums, through dialogue, we can sort of negotiate or reach consensus and common ground on things that we can agree on. And with regards to these international forums, they can certainly assist us in finding a common plan of action for making the role of ICC more robust and acceptable. States, obviously, that have ratified the Rome Statute and implemented its provisions in their domestic law also need to share their insights with potential members, with current members, because it's a very daunting task, because once you become a state party to the Rome Statute, you then obviously have to adopt it to your national law. And where there are, complex legal systems, where there are hybrid legal systems, and not just, of course, you've got the civil law jurisdictions, you've got the common law jurisdictions, but then you've got a hybrid of jurisdictions as well, where you've, in countries such as Pakistan, we've got the Sharia law as well. So we do have to see it from that perspective as well. So the countries that have already ratified the Rome Statutes, they could perhaps, shed some light or insight, or share some insight into how we can then adapt this into, or how easily, by way of an example, perhaps from maybe perhaps from the panelists or from the audience, the participants, of how easy, of how difficult was it for the member states that have signed to the Rome Statute to then implement and transcend that into the national legislation, or to reflect that into the national legislation. Holistic regional dialogue is certainly critical in building consensus on the international criminal law regime. But there's one point of concern, and of course, this was obviously also raised during various discussions that took place yesterday and today as well. And one of the point of concern is, of course, global powers like the US, China, Russia are actually not state parties to the Rome Statute. So obviously, it creates an impression that the ICC is used as a political tool to influence policies of the least developed world. Now, having said that, another point of concern, obviously, is the Rome Statute actually permits the ICC to initiate prosecution against individuals of state upon referral from UN Security Council, whereas 3 out of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have not yet ratified the Rome Statute. So this is, again, another point of concern where 3 of the 5 major members of the Security Council, and when the mandate has been given to the Security Council that they can actually refer a case to initiate prosecutions against individuals of the state. So that's, again, another point of concern. And on this, I have a suggestion as well, and a way forward as a CBM, as a confidence building measure amongst those prospective member states or state parties that, perhaps we could, and I'm sure this will be very difficult in any way, but I'm sure, amending the Rome Statute in consultation with the members and the state parties that have already actually signed the Rome Statute. So we can certainly work on that. So, and finally, it's, the major step towards universal adoption of the Rome Statute would be to leverage diplomatic channels to convince major global powers to accede to the jurisdiction of the ICC. And of course, ICC itself needs to set uniform and discernible parameters of the principles of complementarity, and should not only act where there's blatant violation of, Statute of Rome. One example would be, as a CBM, to prospective member states or state parties that actually you might be thinking or pondering over joining or ratifying or signing the Rome Statute as well, could be, as a CBM, to perhaps amend and take this power away from the Security Council. So this could also be, this is, again, a discussion. I know it's something that's too big, of course, to start with. But of course, when you talk about selective applicability of the Rome Statute, especially in the regional context. So you do have to see it from that perspective as well, where state parties are actually withdrawing from being signatory or ratifications to the Rome Statute. So, but Pakistan actually has always supported the establishment of impartial and effective international mechanisms that are fair, independent, and complementary to national systems, free from political influence. Pakistan remains committed to the principles of justice and accountability and advocates for a consistent and universal application of the international humanitarian law, free from double standards or selective implementation, taking everything into account, no matter how diverse nature of challenges it faces. ICC, however, stands as a crucial institution that could prove instrumental to fostering global justice. By way of promoting cooperation and dialogue, international community can certainly work towards strengthening the ICC as an effective adjudicatory institution that promotes global justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barrister. That marks the end of our presentations. But before I open the floor for questions and comments, allow me to say one or two. Our panelists have indeed made a wonderful presentation, meaningful and powerful. I was listening from Zimbabwe, And I've concluded that it seems that the international criminal court system is one-sided in the sense that only powerless and poor countries are the one bear the most injustice, while the other richer countries are getting away with criminality. So, honorable members, let's brainstorm, strategize. We can do better. How long will our women continue suffering, raped, and killed? I thank you. The floor is open. And can just raise your hand, and thank you so much. Mike. Please, Mike.
And hello. Hello. Yeah. Okay.
Please.
Fine.
Please, Secretariat. Just come forward and speak from here. Come forward.
My name is Mohammed Khan Daha. I'm member National Assembly for third time. I wanted to ask, I think all these organizations, like the UN or the International Criminal Court, they were made at times of war in the West, especially. And even if they are working now, but they don't look after the human rights or the human right violations being done in developing countries or other parts of the world. I think that's an objection by most of the world. Even the UN reports are there that there have been human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir, in Palestine, and I think on social media, on TV, we can see bombing and killing, and especially it's more than, you can say, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and I think then the countries which we say develop or progressive or who should be taking, protecting the rights of these people are still implementing laws to finance countries like Israel, India, more at this time when the whole world is in shock that how much killing and so my question is that I think that challenges the credibility of all these organizations, that these organizations are not working as objective, they are more selective, that what they think interests them, that's where they take action. And I think if something like what's going on in Palestine would have been in the West, it would have been another, more than a Holocaust, But when we see in European Parliament or US Parliament, we see there are number of people who are representative. They are okay with all this killing, and they say, okay, we should fund Israel more. He's our friend, even though they don't see all that bloodshed. Especially, I think it can shock every person, every human being, when we see small children, like at that age where they should be playing, they are carrying their siblings, brother, sister, like 2-3-year-old, they are walking alone on the streets. And I think the world has turned a blind eye. So I think that's the biggest challenge to International Criminal Court and other organizations. When they turn a blind eye to that, then they expect the other countries to trust them and support them or join them. And I think there were a number of things which were mentioned that, which will make it a crime against humanity. But nothing was said about dropping bombs on civilian populations. Like there have been on civilian populations, we can see the whole cities turn into rubble. And I don't know if it still counts as crime against humanity or not, because I think world should, other than personal interest, everybody should raise their voice against all these killings and abuses being done. And I think that will be the biggest support for these organizations from all over the world once they raise the voice for every human being without being selective about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable members, when asking questions, let's keep time. Our questions should be brief, not too long, not too short, but reasonable brief. I see a hand up there. The floor is yours. Thank you. I hope the mics are working now.
Said I'm dealing with cases in Africa. So to suggest that the ICC doesn't deal with cases in Africa, and indeed one of the complaints I've heard here is that it's dealing too much with cases in Africa. But what it has actually been doing recently is something quite different. I believe that some improvements could be made in the ICC, and I referred to them. I can stop shouting now. I referred to them yesterday, or some of them. But actually, what has the ICC been doing recently? We've heard a lot at this conference about Gaza and almost nothing about Ukraine. But actually, the ICC's prosecutor has given advice and an application for warrants in relation to members of the Israeli government and members of Hamas, some of whom are now dead, so they can't be prosecuted in a court of law, which I regard as a much better outcome than execution. The International Criminal Court is checking the complementarity of the great work that's being done in Ukraine as it goes on, and we've heard from a very distinguished person from the Ukraine during this meeting about how many cases they have. And I think the problem that the International Court has, by and large, is that people think, yes, we want it, but it's not quite doing well enough yet. Well, I think that's a good point to start from. I've seen the draft statement communique that's proposed to be issued, and I think it contains the excellent language and the right degree of optimism. But I hope that others here are not going to be wholly negative about the ICC because they have some political points to make that court. And let's not forget, forgive me for going on a little bit longer than you wanted, moderator, but I'm going to add one point. Let's not forget that the ICC does not stand alone. The ICC stands alongside other treaty organizations, other treaties that have been made, including, of course, the ICJ. And above all, it stands alongside all those courts like yours in Ukraine, which are doing their very best to ensure that they do the first thing that should be done, which is prosecute war criminals in their own jurisdictions, so that the evidence is presented in their own jurisdictions, so they go to prisons in their own jurisdictions and are seen in their own jurisdictions.
Thank you very much for your question.
I'm not sure my voice is as loud as
okay.
but I would like to, a lot of what I'd wanted to be said was said before. I wanted to caution us a little bit about this idea of only developing countries signing on to the ICC and that there are these superpowers who are not. The truth, if we are to look across the world in recent times, is that there are some countries who don't give two hoots about anyone but themselves. And we have all been in organizations with them without an issue. So let us not use that today to say, the US hasn't signed on to the ICC. This hasn't signed on to the ICC. If the rest of us sign on, if the rest of us, as you have said, look at where there are issues and weaknesses and see how we can change and strengthen, then we all become that much stronger together. When they went for Muammar Gaddafi, many persons said nothing as well. Many mouths were shut. So let's remember that.
Thank you. I just wanted to emphasize that for us who are here, we are here because there is a guiding principle. And what brings us here is the principle that we believe in the universality of justice. So we are not here on a political platform. We are not here on a religious platform. If we go that direction, then this meeting will come to an end immediately. So what unites us here is our genuine belief that humanity needs universality of justice. Justice without a political or religious agenda. In that sense, we also should accept that the world can never be a better place if you remove institutions such as the ICC. It means there will be chaos in this planet. No one will be accountable to anyone. There will be injustice everywhere. We will be living like animals in the jungle. Survival of the fittest. Mighty is right. For this world to stand longer or to sustain itself longer, whether it's issues of climate change and so on, we will need those who feel that the world needs to unite to come together to the center. We cannot wait for others. We have to fight from where we are, and then others will join later. Because if we start to point to those who have not joined us, we will lose focus. The real reason why there's a United Nations in this planet is because earlier on in the previous century, if you look at the history of this world, First World War, League of Nations, why did they introduce again the United Nations? They learned that one country or one person can just divert the whole country into war, in the whole world into war. We know about Adolf Hitler. So those who funded the United Nations accepted that we need to have a center of some sort of moralism. So the UN as it is today, if it didn't exist, what will be this planet be like? So the same agenda we're saying we need the United Nations to reform is because we are saying we need the UN. Can you see what we are saying? We're not saying the UN must be dissolved. We're saying it must be what? Reformed to reflect the present state of justice or the world global order compared to 1945. So the ICC is the future of this planet. If you do not support the ICC, you support chaos. At the end of the day, everyone will just wake up, Pakistan, how are you? Papa. India, how are you? Papa. No one will be in charge. So all the countries who have not signed, are actually a threat to humanity. You are threatening the future of this planet. So we are not supposed to admire those countries, including Pakistan. They are failing us as humans. They must not be outside. They must be inside, fighting and saying we want a better ICC. We want a better UN. If you walk out, you are a threat to the future of humanity.
Thank you very much. You have made your point. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, proceed. Take the floor.
Hello. I was just about to say that I also have a very loud voice. But that aside, I'm just saying after such an elaborate speech, it becomes very difficult to say. Nonetheless, I've been sitting here and listening. And I keep hearing everybody saying the world has evolved. But we are not examining how the world has evolved. Other than technology, for those of you who are watching the American elections, and sometimes I listen and I'm like, is this US elections or is this elections of an African country? That is how much the world has evolved, that America has become like an African country of 20 years ago. And a lot of African countries have become like America of 20 years ago. So instead of sitting here where we are legislators and lamenting about America and other countries not signing in, why can't Pakistan and Kenya take the lead and let America follow us? They'll catch us in an evolving world. Why are we always letting set the path for us? The world has evolved. And I'm so came to Pakistan. And yesterday during the speech at the award ceremony, I said it and I wasn't joking. That what is my view of Islamabad before I came here? I was shocked. It's an amazing country. But what do I get from the news? What do I get from the news? Totally different things. Yes, you have your challenges, just like my country has challenges. But if we start talking to each other, instead of at each other, instead of waiting for America and others to set the pace, it is time that we took the leadership, set the pace, join the ICC, reform what needs to be reformed, and then we will go for America and the other countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allow our panelists to respond to those questions. I'll take the second round. So it will go like this. The first question will go to Mr. Ali.
I mean, I don't feel that there is anything to say anymore. But any criticism is good criticism in any event. We can always find a way to consider them. It's better when criticism is actually properly based and substantiated. But in any event, there has been responses already given, so I don't see what I can add.
Thank you very much. Yesterday, it was said that in Africa, there is a common saying that African solutions to African problem. And this morning, when I started my presentation, I said, I'm leaving this place as an ambassador for Pakistan. An ambassador for Pakistan because all the narratives on the radio with the reality, what I came and saw, are completely different. So meaning that what? And so meaning that that international relation, that cooperation should now become Pakistanis African solution for Pakistani problem and Pakistani problem for African solution. That's the kind of cooperation that we want to build. And let me share an example with you people for those who do not trust in international justice system. My country, Cameroon and Nigeria, went to the International Court of Justice in 1994 because they avoided conflict, they avoided armed conflict. And at the end of 8 years, the International Court of Justice ruled in favor of Cameroon. And there was peace. There was no war between these two countries. And so we should learn to trust the justice system and build on the justice system, because nobody will come from another place to come and build a justice system for us. It's only us, and we have to do that based on trust. Thank you very much.
Madam Consilia, you can say one or two. Thank you.
2 minutes. Remind me.
Sorry?
Nothing really was directed to my presentation.
Oh, all right.
Unless there is something else.
All right. Any question? The last round? Oh. No, proceed, but make it short.
Asad Niazi, I am member of the parliament. I just want to little go back. The Russia has been the member of this ICC, and he has been not now, long has been raising a voice, and it was not listened. He said in Article 16 and 13th of ICC, this organization is totally biased toward the Western side. So in 2016, the Russians signed out with this. It's on record, if you can have a look. And now, if you see the America, even the Turkey and Saudi Arabia and most of the countries have not signed this. So my point is that we should have not let the Russians should have stay in, so that it was a superpower and should have a big hand to us. Now, what we just want one thing, and that is a justice. And nothing else, a justice. Which is happening in Gaza, it is all, I don't have to repeat, I don't have to take much time. And what's happening in occupied Kashmir, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in all over the world. So we should not get into this thing. We should be strong enough to give a justice to the poor people and to humanity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any question? We need to give some time to our secretariat for recommendations and resolutions. Any question? The last burning issue? Okay. Thank you very much. This marks the end of our discussion, and would like to thank our panelists for their contributions. And to you, honorable members, thank you very much for your active participation. This topic has been very interesting, and I really appreciate for your brilliant ideas. Let's make things possible. We can do better. Let's make the world a better place for everyone. Let's remember our women are dying, children are suffering, and they are waiting for us to come up with best ideas for them to say, we thank Allah, we thank God, things are now better. With these few remarks, I thank you once again for listening.
miss out today's dinner and maybe tomorrow's breakfast also. So, this just as a preamble to this, that we, the parliamentarians who are sitting here in this conference, this is our declaration and our document. Doesn't mean that it's any particular state is endorsing this document. So it's the individual members of parliament. Okay. The plan of action for international justice. We, the members of parliament participating in the 45th annual forum of the Parliamentarians for Global Action and the 15th Consultative Assembly of Parliamentarians on the International Criminal Court and the Rule of Law, CAP-ICC. Express our gratitude to the Parliament of Pakistan and Parliamentarians for Global Action for co-organizing the Assembly, to the panelists for sharing their experiences with a distinguished audience, as well as to funders and international partners for the invaluable support they provide to the work of PGA in the promotion of accountability, human rights, and the rule of law. We organize, I'm having difficulty with this word, but the way it's written. Recognize the diversity of views on the issue of universality and effectiveness of the Rome Statute, as well as the differences in legal obligations of parties and non-parties to the Rome Statute. Noting that the deliberations took place within the framework of PGA's campaign for the universality and effectiveness of the Rome Statute. Note with deep concern the rise in violent conflicts, crisis, and violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, which threatens global peace and security and challenge our shared commitment of never again. Note with deep concern the rise in violent conflicts, crises, and violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, which threaten global peace and security and challenge our shared commitment of never again. Acknowledge, where applicable, the vital role of International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system in investigating and prosecuting the most serious crimes of concern to the international community, namely the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crimes of aggression. Express deep concern over the ongoing threats and attempts to undermine the independence, integrity, impartiality, and functioning of the ICC, as well as the safety of human rights defenders and civil society organizations committed to the fight against impunity, which jeopardize the ability to deliver justice, ensure accountability, support survivors and communities of victims, and uphold emphasize that further efforts are needed to end cycles of impunity for perpetrators and elevate the suffering for millions of citizens, including those protected persons under the Geneva Conventions. Highlight the urgent need to strengthen the framework for prosecuting gender-based crimes, including sexual, reproductive, and other gender-based violence, especially in the situations of conflict, recognizing that such crimes not only undermine peace-building efforts and perpetuate inequality and injustice, but also disproportionately affect women, girls, and vulnerable groups, leading to several severe physical, psychological, and social consequences. Underscored the urgent need to address emerging international concerns, particularly ecocide with threatened ecosystems, biodiversity, and our shared heritage, and the protection of the environment for our future generation. Reaffirm the crucial role played by parliamentarians where applicable in advancing the universality and effectiveness of the Rome Statute system, strengthening both domestic and international criminal justice while promoting the rule of law and safeguarding human rights. Resolve to, number one, continue engagement and dialogue on the ratification of the Rome Statute of the ICC and its amendments and ensure global accountability for the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Number two, ensure the adoption of the state parties of domestic legislation that fully aligns with the Rome Statute by incorporating the definitions of the four core crimes, general principles, and the rights of survivors and communities of victims, and by guaranteeing full cooperation of states parties with the ICC. Promote stronger international cooperation by calling the state parties to comply with those international legal obligations under the Rome Statute and encouraging them to conclude bilateral cooperation agreements with the ICC, including the enforcement of sentences, protection and relocation of witnesses, and interim and final release. Urge state parties to
provide sufficient political.
I have problems with these italics that they have put in.
To provide sufficient political.
Yeah. Urge state parties to provide sufficient political and financial support to the ICC to ensure independence, effectiveness, and efficiency, and condemn any threats or political interference that could undermine the very functioning of the court. Cognizant of the ongoing discussions and differences in legal and political views among the states on the role of ICC on the issue, strengthening national legal framework to address gender-based crime, ensuring access to justice for survivors and communities of victims. By A, addressing the root cause of the sexual violence and acknowledge that gender-based crimes can occur in any context, including during times of peace. Adopting or amending legislation to combat gender violence, including the ensuring access to justice to survivors and communities of justice, and providing the necessary framework to guarantee that these crimes are prosecuted with the same level of seriousness as other crimes. Providing recognition and support for survivors and communities of victims, especially those affected by gender, apartheid, and other systematic gender-based violence. Urge legislation to take tangible actions through their respective legislative and oversight roles in order to promote the environment to protect the environment for our future generations by including large-scale environment destruction in their criminal codes. Defend the independence and impartiality of the ICC
And
denounce the sanctions level against the court so that its organs can continue to its essential work unhindered by political pressure or threats. Acknowledge the critical role of human rights defenders and civil society organizations to upholding accountability and ensure that these protections from any threats or attacks, including by strengthening the civic space and guaranteeing their participation in relevant accountability and justice processes. And number 9, promote public awareness of the ICC and international rule of law by fostering public debates to raise awareness on the importance of the Rome Statute system, including by engaging, respecting, and addressing perspectives on its jurisdiction, applicability, as well as perception of politicization, and building support for the principles of international justice and accountability for the most serious crimes. I presented to you this forum for adoption. If we are all in agreement, please raise your hands. Sorry? I have made a suggestion. If we in general agree on that, kindly send your suggestions so that it could be incorporated in the final document. Yeah.
Because the declaration.
The only thing is, and that's what I'm going to add, I'm not going to read out the paragraph, but it's also important to put more emphasis of what we can do for the victim. So it's about supporting victims' activities.
Can you formulate that and tell us, please? One second. Can you formulate that sentence, or you leave it to the secretariat to do it? Okay. Fine.
Sorry.
Fine, that is fine. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, in terms of the drafting, there is a problem with the logical flow of the points. There are some 2 points around the ICC that are at the end. They should actually be at the top. So you should...
We can rearrange that. That's not a problem. Yeah. Okay. That's it. Can we adopt it now? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is there a...
My apologies. I would like to make a comment that perhaps in echoing what my colleague said during his intervention, that if there would be a possibility to make a link in the language on national investigative systems and perhaps the LHC as a mechanism through which that can be supported. Of course, that is something that supports the spirit of complementarity of the ICC as well. I can put a suggestion in writing, but I don't know if that's possible within the system or if a member should do so.
No.
Thank you.
You can write to the PGA because we can further discuss that. Now, can I finally have some agreement on the document? Please raise your hand and then. Thank you very much. I think this has been a successful 2 days of debate. We have heard various viewpoints. Not everyone was in agreement on everything, but by and large, we all moved in the same direction and we want this organization to move forward. We want the ICC to move forward. And if there are any fine-tuning to be done, I think we should be looking to the future to do that. Otherwise, I think it's doing a great job, but it can do better. Thank you very much, all of you. One. No, I know. I'm coming to that. Yesterday, we had a group photo of all the international delegates. However, the Pakistan delegates were waiting upstairs and they didn't get a chance to join the group. So today I will request whoever is present here that at the end of this session, if they can all gather around here only, we can have one more group photograph. Thank you.
Thank you. This middle portion.
Yeah, complicated nahi, Corona.
Thank you. I just want 2 minutes to thank a long list of people because it has been incredibly generous and warmth, the reception that we have all felt here in Pakistan. And I think I echo Honorable Odiambo's words when she says that, of course, one thing is actually arriving in a country and having the privilege to learn about and from you rather than reading on the news. And so I ask you to bear with me for just 2 minutes to thank again a long list of persons, starting of course with you, Honorable Said Navid Kamar. Thank you so much as PGA President for your guidance and your mentorship, but also for your leadership in the PGA network and for inviting us to Pakistan. Of course, to the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, to Senator Sherry Rehman, our chairperson, thank you so much for being with us and also for your commitment to the objectives of PGA. Allow me also to say thank you to the National Assembly Secretariat, to Mr. Saeed Shamoun Hashmi, who has made all the efforts. Thank you so much. To Mr. Muhammad Ali. I don't know if he's inside or he's. Oh, thank you so much. You responded to messages, to text messages on New York time. You've been incredibly, very responsive. It has been a pleasure to work with you. To of course the whole protocol in the airport, to the facilitators in the airport facilitation, to the hotel security, to everyone. I think I'm gonna probably miss people, but really everyone from the persons. Yes. I am there. I have a list. I said I had a list. The National Assembly Secretariat, within them, every single person. Thank you so much for making us feel so welcomed in your country. To of course the Pakistan Institute for Parliamentary Services, Mr. Mohammed Rashid Mafsul Saka, its executive director. Thank you for opening the doors of your premises and your beautiful lawn, to preparing everything for Mr. Samer Awais, the Director General, Mr. Saeed Wakar Abbas Shah, the Director of Administration, Mr. Mohammed Nasir Khan, the Director General of IT. And if I'm missing anyone, please forgive me, but for all the team that has helped us during these days to place the microphones, to get the waters, to put the video testimonies, thank you so much. We very much appreciate it. To the interpreters of the National University, yes, please. To the interpreters of the National University of Modern Languages in Islamabad, thank you for the interpretation during these 2 days. To also the young women and men who served and helped us as ushers during these 2 days, thank you so much. I hope that during these 2 days you felt renewed and think about you really are the younger generation, you're coming next, and this is also about you taking action for your own futures and those of your families. Of course, to every single one of you, all the Pakistani MPs, I know that these days were very intense in the Senate and in the National Assembly, so we very much appreciate your generosity in the time that you gave us in participating in the panels, but also in attending the sessions. Of course, as I said yesterday, to every single parliamentarian from far and wide who made the effort to travel to Islamabad during these times, we very much appreciate, I said this, we see you, we hear you, and please do connect with us, with the Secretariat, so that we can continue the engagement, and this is not a one and only moment. Please do connect with us. We love to hear from you. And last, but certainly not least, the work that we do in the PGA Secretariat, it's not only me. We need a team of experts, of really passionate persons that really are helping with us, and you've seen them. So allow me to, if you haven't met them, and all are women here with me, to introduce to you Frederica Shegoferova, who is the Director of the International Law and Human Rights Program. Miss Olivia Houses, sorry, who says, Professor Olivia. Our program officer also for the international law and human rights, Jennifer McCarthy, our Deputy Secretary General. Ana Repas, our program associate for the Human Rights and Environment Program. Tiffany Omundsen, our Senior Development Officer. Sara Monaville, our Director of the Human Rights and Environment Program. And of course, Fiona Servaz also. She's our new consultant, also working on international law and human rights program. And with that, just Daniel, we wish you all the best of luck in your new position on the Trust Fund. You were for many years also part of PGA. We love to see you grow and we hope to continue collaboration. But you also started the work on the CAP-ICC. So also to you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, so see you at dinner, logistical, at 6:30, the boss will depart. So be in the lobby 6:30, please, to go to the dinner hosted by the President of the Senate. Thank you.
All delegates, please stand. So all the delegates can stand on their feet, on their seats. Please, all the delegates can come in the center. In the center, stand on your seat.
Emphasize that further